Hey guys, tonight we dim the lights and drift far, far away from your comfy bed, plunging instead into a world where survival isn't a game, but a daily, biting reality. Imagine, if you will, the vast, unbroken expanse of the Central Asian steppe stretching out before you. The wind, a constant, unseen companion, whips around your face, carrying the scent of dry grass and distant dust. Overhead, an impossibly huge sky, sometimes a searing blue, sometimes a bruised, tumultuous gray, presses down on an endless, undulating landscape. You're not just observing this. You are here. You feel the grit of the earth under your worn boots, the chill that permeates your thick felt tunic even in summer, the raw, untamed wildness that is your only home. This isn't just a place. It's a force, shaping everything you know, everything you do, and most importantly for our story tonight, everything you eat. You're probably used to ordering whatever you crave with a few taps on your phone, but out here, your very existence hinges on a far more primal, far more demanding menu. You probably won't survive this for more than a few days, but hey, at least you'll get a good story out of it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are a Mongol warrior, not just any warrior, but one forged in the crucible of the steppe, a land that demands resilience, ingenuity, and a certain kind of pragmatic ruthlessness. And the first, most fundamental lesson this land teaches you about sustenance is this: you eat what lives, you eat what moves, and you eat what adapts. Because the steppe? Oh, it's not exactly a culinary paradise. Forget lush fields of grain. Forget sprawling orchards. Forget cozy little vegetable patches. The steppe is, for the most part, a merciless, treeless ocean of grass, punctuated by occasional rivers and lakes, and prone to extreme, brutal weather patterns. You're talking about winters that can plunge to -40 degrees Celsius, where the very air crystallizes in your lungs, followed by summers that bake the earth to a cracked, dusty hardness, where the sun beats down with an almost malicious intensity. It's a land of feast or famine, of sudden blizzards and devastating droughts. Your very survival, therefore, is inextricably linked to your ability to move with the seasons, to follow the elusive patterns of pasture and water, and to sustain yourself from the most reliable, most mobile resource available, your animals. This nomadic lifestyle isn't a choice, not really. It's a dictated necessity. You don't decide to pack up your yurt and herd your sheep, goats, horses, and yaks across hundreds of miles. The land forces you to. If you stay in one place too long, your herds will strip the pasture bare, and then what? Starvation. So you move, always, a constant, flowing river of life, following the grass, seeking the water, escaping the harshest extremes. This perpetual motion, this relentless journey, is the very core of your existence, and it profoundly dictates your diet. You can't carry much. Your possessions are limited to what can be packed onto a horse or a camel, what can be quickly set up and torn down. This means your food can't be delicate, it can't be bulky, and it certainly can't be something that spoils easily. It has to be compact, calorie-dense, and incredibly durable. Think of it as the ultimate in ancient MREs, but instead of plastic packaging, it's all natural, all animal-based, and all about raw, unadulterated energy. Your idea of roughing it might be a tent with no Wi-Fi. Their idea was a tent with no anything except a really cold breeze and the constant threat of hunger. The sheer scale of the Central Asian steppe, stretching from the forests of Siberia down to the deserts of Gobi and into Eastern Europe, meant that for millennia, its inhabitants were forced into this mobile existence. This vastness, far from being an empty space, was a dynamic ecosystem where life thrived precariously. And within this ecosystem, the Mongol warrior wasn't just living. You were mastering it. This mastery wasn't about conquering the land itself, but about understanding its rhythms, bending to its will, and extracting every last ounce of sustenance from its challenging embrace. It was a constant negotiation with nature, a delicate balance between taking what you needed and preserving what sustained you. You learn to read the subtle signs of the land, the direction of the wind, the quality of the grass, the behavior of the animals. These aren't just details. They are the difference between a full belly and an empty one, between life and a swift, cold end. Your diet, therefore, is a direct reflection of this environment. It's not about variety. It's about efficiency. It's not about gourmet flavors. It's about raw, potent calories. It's a diet built for endurance, for speed, for the relentless demands of a life lived on horseback. Forget your fancy food delivery apps. Out here, your delivery service is a swift horse and a very sharp knife. Everything you eat must contribute to your ability to ride for days, to fight fiercely, to withstand the elements that would quickly break a less adapted people. This isn't just fuel. It's the very building blocks of your formidable physical prowess. The meat and dairy from your herds are not just food items. They are the currency of your survival, the very essence of your nomadic economy. Without them, you are nothing. Without them, you perish. This profound dependency on animals is a mainstream historical fact that underscores every aspect of Mongol life, from their social structure to their military campaigns. Their entire civilization was built on the back of a horse and fueled by its kin. One quirky tidbit, perhaps, about this environment's influence. The Mongol warriors' intimate knowledge of the steppe meant they could navigate vast distances with an almost supernatural intuition, often guided by subtle shifts in vegetation that indicated water or better pasture. It wasn't just about maps, which they rarely used. It was about an ingrained, almost genetic understanding of their surroundings. They knew where the best grasses were, even after years of drought, and they knew which paths offered the quickest routes to new grazing lands. This deep ecological intelligence directly impacted where and when they could feed their herds, and by extension, themselves. It was like having a built-in GPS that ran on instinct and generations of accumulated wisdom. If you thought your commute was bad, try packing up your entire house and moving it across a continent every few weeks, relying only on the smell of the wind and the look of the grass. The relentless demands of the steppe also fostered a deep sense of pragmatism when it came to food. There was no room for waste, no time for elaborate preparations. Every part of an animal was utilized, every caloric opportunity seized. This wasn't just a cultural preference. It was a matter of life and death. When resources are scarce and hard-won, you learn to appreciate every single morsel. This mentality shaped not just what they ate, but how they prepared it, how they preserved it, and how they carried it. It was a diet designed for maximum utility with minimal fuss. And historians still argue whether the sheer scale of their conquests was more a result of military genius or simply the desperate, inherent need to find new pastures and resources for their ever-growing herds and population, driving them outward from the harsh core of the steppe. Was it ambition or ecological necessity? Perhaps a potent blend of both. So, as you settle into this ancient, unforgiving landscape, understand that the nomadic table isn't a table at all. It's the ground beneath your feet, the saddle of your horse, the inside of your felt yurt. Your kitchen is the open sky, your pantry the herds that graze around you. The challenges of the steppe, the extreme temperatures, the scarcity of water, the vast distances, the unpredictable nature of the land didn't just influence the Mongol warriors' diet, they forged it. They dictated every bite, every sip, every method of preservation, turning sustenance into a masterpiece of pragmatic survival, perfectly aligned with a life of constant motion and, eventually, military dominance. This isn't just about what they ate. It's about how the land itself taught them to eat, transforming them into the most formidable fighting force the world had ever seen, fueled by the very essence of the steppe. If you were a Mongol warrior, your relationship with meat wasn't just about sustenance. It was existential. It was the very pulse of your nomadic life, the fuel that kept your heart beating through the icy winds of the steppe and the relentless sun of summer. Forget your modern-day debates about carb loading or intermittent fasting. For you, the answer to every dietary question, every energy crisis, and every rumbling stomach was unequivocally, gloriously meat. Your very survival, your ability to ride for days on end, to endure the harshest conditions, and to wield a bow with deadly precision, stemmed directly from the abundant animal protein and fat that formed the bedrock of your diet. It wasn't a choice, not really. It was the fundamental, non-negotiable truth of living on the vast, unforgiving steppe. Your herds weren't just your wealth. They were your walking, bleeding, galloping larder. A mobile buffet that moved with you, providing everything you needed to conquer worlds. Imagine, if you will, waking up to the vast, endless expanse of the steppe. The only sounds the rustle of grass and the distant bleating of your sheep. Your grocery store was just your backyard, and your backyard was about 1,000 square miles of prime grazing land. These animals, your precious herds, were more than just livestock. They were your lifeblood. While you also kept hardy horses, primarily for riding and their milk, though sometimes for meat in dire straits, and sturdy cattle, and even camels for transport, it was the humble sheep that truly ruled your culinary world. Goats were there too, resilient and resourceful, but sheep, particularly their mutton, were the undisputed champions of the Mongol plate. They were docile enough to herd easily across vast distances, prolific in their breeding, and remarkably efficient at converting sparse steppe grasses into rich, nourishing meat and fat. Counting sheep wasn't just for falling asleep, it was for figuring out dinner plans for the next week, and sometimes the next month. Mutton, glorious mutton, was the undisputed king. Its rich fat content provided the sustained energy you needed for those long, arduous journeys and brutal battles. Unlike lean meats, which might give you a quick burst, the fat in mutton burned slowly, providing a steady warmth and caloric intake that was essential for combating the biting cold of the steppe winters. When you butchered a sheep, it wasn't just about the muscle, it was about the entire animal. Every part was prized and utilized. The fat, the organs, the bones, and nothing went to waste. This was a zero-waste philosophy born not of trendy eco-consciousness, but of absolute necessity. You understood, instinctively, that every calorie was precious, every nutrient vital. This wasn't just a meal. It was a survival strategy, meticulously refined over generations of nomadic existence. The fat, in particular, was revered. It was insulation, energy, and a source of deep satisfaction in a world where hunger was a constant companion for those less fortunate. When it came time to eat, efficiency was key. On the move, a complex culinary setup wasn't an option. The most common method of preparing meat was boiling. Picture this: a sturdy cauldron, probably iron, suspended over a crackling fire. Into it went chunks of fresh mutton, perhaps some wild onions or garlic if you'd foraged them along the way, and a pinch of salt if available. The simplicity was deceptive. The resulting broth was incredibly rich, packed with protein and fat, warming you from the inside out. There was no need for elaborate spices or complex preparations. The natural flavor of the meat, imbued with the essence of the steppe grasses it had grazed upon, was more than enough. You might sit around the fire, sharing steaming bowls, the aroma of boiling fat wafting through the cool evening air, a scent as comforting and familiar as your own breath. This wasn't just food. It was a communal ritual, a moment of respite and shared strength. Sometimes, for special occasions or when stationary for a short period, you might engage in more elaborate, by steppe standards, cooking methods. You might roast larger cuts over an open flame, the fat sizzling and dripping into the fire, creating a smoky, irresistible aroma. Or perhaps you'd prepare korkhog, a traditional dish where meat, often mutton, along with vegetables like potatoes and carrots, if acquired through trade or conquest, is cooked in a sealed container using superheated stones. The stones, heated directly in the fire, are placed inside the pot with the ingredients, cooking the meat from the inside out, rendering it incredibly tender and flavorful. Or even the more adventurous boudog, where an entire animal, usually a goat, is deboned through its neck, and the meat, along with hot stones, is cooked inside its own skin. The skin then puffs up like a balloon as it cooks, creating a truly impressive and delicious spectacle. These methods, while less frequent on daily campaigns, highlight the deep respect and ingenuity applied to meat preparation. You ate vast quantities of meat. This wasn't about portion control. It was about consuming enough calories to sustain a highly active, physically demanding life. Historians still debate the precise ratio of different meats in the average warrior's diet, though mutton undeniably reigns supreme. It's widely accepted that a Mongol warrior could consume several pounds of meat a day, especially during periods of intense activity. This sheer volume of high-quality protein and fat was crucial for building and maintaining the formidable physical endurance for which the Mongols were renowned. Think about it. No refined sugars, no processed foods, just pure, unadulterated animal power. Your diet was the ultimate ancestral diet, refined not by fads, but by centuries of pragmatic survival. Interestingly, during hunts or in moments of extreme hunger, you might even consume certain parts of the animal raw. For instance, it wasn't uncommon for warriors to eat fresh liver or kidney immediately after a kill. This quirky tidbit might seem a little, raw to modern sensibilities, but it was a quick, efficient way to get vital nutrients and a burst of energy when time was of the essence. It was a testament to the no-waste philosophy and the absolute pragmatism of your diet. Your body was a finely tuned machine, and meat was its premium fuel. The concept of vegetarian was probably as foreign to you as a skyscraper. "You mean, you don't eat meat?" was likely the most incredulous question you could imagine. The mainstream historical fact here is clear. The Mongol diet was overwhelmingly meat-centric, and their ability to sustain large armies on campaign was directly linked to their vast herds and their efficient methods of animal husbandry and meat consumption. They famously drove live animals with them on their campaigns, ensuring a fresh supply of meat was always available, a mobile food source unlike anything seen before or since. This was a logistical marvel, a moving feast that allowed them to penetrate deep into enemy territory without relying on vulnerable supply lines. Their diet wasn't just about survival, it was a strategic advantage, a calorie plan perfectly aligned with military dominance. So, as you drift off, imagine that deep satisfaction, the warmth in your belly, the strength in your muscles, all thanks to the humble sheep and its glorious mutton. It was the core of your survival, the engine of your conquest, and the taste of home no matter how far you roamed. As the biting steppe wind whips around your felt yurt, carrying the distant bleating of your herd, you begin to truly appreciate the genius, the sheer pragmatic brilliance, of a foodstuff known simply as borts. This isn't just dried meat. It's the very heartbeat of your nomadic existence, the fuel that powers your relentless journeys and, indeed, your formidable military endeavors. Imagine, if you will, the ultimate survival food, crafted not in a sterile lab, but by the relentless forces of nature itself. It's the original protein bar, but without the questionable ingredients list or the need for a gym membership. Your primary source of sustenance, as we've established, is the living larder that follows you across the vast plains. Your sheep, goats, cattle, and horses. When it comes to borts, the preferred choice is almost always mutton. Why mutton? Because it's abundant, its fat content is just right for preservation, and its flavor, once concentrated, is deeply satisfying. You watch or perhaps participate as the animals are expertly butchered, a skill passed down through generations. There's no waste here, not a single scrap. Every part serves a purpose, but for borts, you're looking for the lean, well-muscled sections. The preparation of borts is an art form dictated by the harsh, yet cooperative steppe climate. This isn't something you do on a whim in the middle of summer. Oh no, the magic of borts truly happens during the frigid embrace of winter. As the air turns crisp and dry, and the temperatures plummet, nature becomes your most efficient dehydrator. You select the leanest cuts of meat, ensuring minimal fat content, as too much fat can go rancid over time, defeating the whole purpose of long-term preservation. You then meticulously slice the meat into long, thin strips, often no thicker than your thumb, sometimes even thinner, like edible leather straps. The goal is maximum surface area exposure for optimal drying. Think of it as preparing oversized bacon strips, but without the sizzling pan. Once sliced, these strips aren't just tossed onto a rack. They are carefully hung on ropes or wooden frames, often suspended high off the ground, perhaps from the rafters of a temporary shelter or, more commonly, simply strung outside your yurt. The steppe wind, a constant companion, becomes your primary tool. It whistles through the hanging meat, steadily drawing out every last molecule of moisture. The cold temperatures act as a natural freezer, preventing spoilage and bacterial growth while the drying process takes place. It's a slow, deliberate dance with the elements, often taking weeks, sometimes even months, for the meat to become perfectly desiccated. You can almost hear the wind whispering, "Dehydrate, dehydrate, dehydrate." As the days turn into weeks, you observe the transformation. The vibrant red of fresh meat slowly darkens, shrinking and shriveling until it becomes a hard, almost stone-like slab, dark brown or even black. It feels incredibly dense, surprisingly light for its volume, and has a texture that would challenge even the most determined modern jaw. This isn't your chewy, sweet and spicy jerky from the convenience store. This is pure, unadulterated, concentrated protein. It's so hard, in fact, that some accounts suggest warriors would even sleep on sacks of borts to keep them warm and prevent them from freezing solid during extreme cold, simultaneously softening them for easier consumption the next day. Talk about multi-purpose. Now, why is this hardened, almost petrified meat considered a marvel? Its brilliance lies in its unparalleled practicality for your nomadic and military lifestyle. First and foremost, its lightweight and compact nature is revolutionary. Imagine trying to provision a vast, mobile army with fresh meat. You'd need an entire second army just to herd the cattle. With borts, the bulk of a whole sheep can be reduced to a small, dense pouch that easily fits into your saddlebag. A few handfuls can sustain a warrior for days, even weeks. This incredible reduction in weight and volume meant that you, the Mongol warrior, could carry your sustenance with you, freeing you from the slow, cumbersome logistics of supply lines that plagued other armies. It's like having a super-condensed energy bar that lasts forever. Then there's its nutritional density. All the water is gone, leaving behind a potent concentration of protein, fat, and calories. A small piece of borts packs an enormous punch. You don't need much to feel satiated and energized, which is crucial when you're riding for days on end, covering vast distances. This high-protein, high-fat diet was perfectly tailored to the demanding physical requirements of constant movement and combat. You could literally feel the fuel coursing through your veins after gnawing on a piece. And let's not forget its longevity. Properly prepared borts kept dry could last for years, even decades. This was not just food. It was an investment in future survival, a hedge against lean times or unexpected detours on your endless journeys. It meant you didn't have to worry about your food spoiling in the heat or freezing beyond recognition in the cold. It was always there, ready. But how did you actually eat this rock-hard sustenance? There were a few ingenious methods, each suited to different circumstances. The simplest and perhaps most common when on the move was to simply chew it dry. You'd break off a piece, tuck it into your cheek like tobacco, and slowly, patiently work at it, allowing your saliva to soften it, gradually releasing its intense, savory flavor. It required strong teeth and a patient disposition, but it provided a steady release of energy without needing to stop or build a fire. This was the ultimate grab-and-go meal for the warrior on horseback. Historians still argue whether the primary method of bort's consumption on campaign was chewing it dry or reconstituting it, as both had significant logistical implications. However, bort's truly shone in its versatility. When you did have the luxury of a brief stop, perhaps overnight, or when the weather turned particularly brutal, you could transform these hardened nuggets into a comforting, nourishing meal. You'd simply shave off pieces or, even better, grind the borts into a fine powder. This powder, when added to hot water, almost instantly reconstituted into a thick, nutrient-rich soup or broth. Imagine the warmth spreading through you on a freezing night, the savory aroma filling the air, a stark contrast to the harsh realities of the steppe. This was a true lifesaver, providing not just calories but also much-needed hydration and warmth. Sometimes you might even mix it with a bit of kumis for an extra kick of energy and flavor. And let's be honest, after a long day of, well, conquering, the last thing you want is a fussy meal. Borts was the ultimate microwave meal of the 13th century. Just add a bit of elbow grease or hot water. The logistical implications of borts cannot be overstated. It allowed you, the Mongol warrior, to move with unparalleled speed and autonomy. You weren't tethered to cumbersome supply wagons or dependent on foraging every single day. Your food was literally in your pocket or saddlebag, ready to fuel your next push. This self-sufficiency was a cornerstone of your military strategy, enabling lightning-fast maneuvers and deep penetrations into enemy territory that would have been impossible for armies reliant on traditional supply chains. It meant fewer stops, less vulnerability, and more time focused on the mission. This ingenious method of preservation, born out of necessity and perfected over centuries, was a testament to your people's profound understanding of their environment and their animals. It required no salt, which was a precious commodity, and no complex smoking chambers. Just the raw power of nature, cold, wind, and time. Forget your fancy artisanal jerky. Bortz was the real OG, probably tasted better too, because, no questionable preservatives. Just pure, unadulterated sheep. It was more than just food. It was a symbol of resilience, adaptability, and the relentless pursuit of efficiency. It was a silent partner in every long ride, every strategic maneuver, and every victorious charge. You trudge, or rather, you ride. You are perpetually on the move, a blur on the vast canvas of the steppe, a relentless wave pushing against the static world. Your horse is your life, your weapon, and often your kitchen table. And what's on that table, or more accurately, tucked into the recesses of your saddlebag, your belt pouch, or even, legend has it, softened beneath your saddle for the day's ride. It's Bortz, that miraculous, unassuming, yet utterly indispensable dried meat. Forget your fancy modern-day energy bars with their exotic berry blends and protein isolates. Bortz was the OG, the original, the ultimate in portable, concentrated power. It's the very essence of your campaign logistics, boiled down to a few fibrous, nutrient-dense morsels. Imagine, if you will, the sheer practicality of this. You are part of an army that doesn't just march. It flows, a river of horsemen sweeping across continents. Traditional armies, with their cumbersome baggage trains, their need for vast supply depots, their slow, predictable advances, they are like snails compared to your whirlwind. They are tethered to the land, beholden to roads and rivers, constantly looking over their shoulders for their next delivery of dried peas and stale bread. But you carry your sustenance on your person, in your saddle, or in small, easily managed packs. It's a liberation, truly. You are, in essence, a walking, riding, fighting, self-contained nutritional unit. Your pantry is your pouch, and your chef is the sun and the wind. Pretty efficient, right? No Michelin stars, perhaps, but incredibly effective. This isn't just about convenience. It's about a fundamental shift in military strategy. Because you are not burdened by supply lines, you can move with an astonishing, almost terrifying speed. You can cover distances that would leave other armies gasping for breath, their horses foundering, their soldiers starving. While they are still trying to figure out how to transport enough grain for a week, you're already 100 miles past their scout lines, appearing as if from nowhere, a storm on the horizon. This ability to vanish and reappear, to strike unexpectedly, was a psychological weapon as potent as any arrow. And it was all thanks, in no small part, to those humble pockets of dried meat. Think about it. A single ox, once butchered and meticulously dried, could yield enough bortz to feed a warrior for weeks, even a month, depending on the intensity of the campaign. This isn't just jerky. It's a hyper-concentrated form of meat, stripped of almost all its moisture, reducing its weight and volume dramatically while preserving its caloric and protein content. It's like taking a whole Sunday roast and shrinking it down to the size of a teacup. You could carry what felt like a mere handful of these dark, dense nuggets, and know that you had enough fuel in your belly to ride hard for days, to endure forced marches through biting winds or scorching deserts, to engage in skirmishes and pitched battles without the gnawing distraction of hunger. It's the ultimate survival food, perfected over generations of nomadic life. The mainstream historical fact here is the astonishing speed of the Mongol armies. Historians widely acknowledge that Mongol cavalry could cover an average of 60 to 70 miles, about 100 to 110 kilometers, a day during rapid advances, sometimes even more, a pace virtually unheard of for large armies of their time. This was not just a matter of good horses or riding skill. It was intrinsically linked to their logistical independence. They didn't need to wait for ox carts laden with grain. Their provisions were literally strapped to their saddles. This allowed them to outmaneuver, outflank, and often simply outrun any opponent, arriving at unexpected locations and striking before defenses could be properly arrayed. It was a strategic advantage born directly from their diet. Now, for a quirky tidbit. While Bortz was primarily chewed as a hard, dry ration, there's a fascinating legend that speaks to its versatility and the ingenuity of the Mongol warrior. Some accounts suggest that a small piece of Bortz could be carried under the saddle, absorbing moisture from the horse's sweat during a long ride. This process, it was said, would slowly rehydrate and tenderize the meat, making it easier to chew and digest when the warrior finally had a moment to eat. Imagine, your horse not just your transport, but your mobile sous chef, slowly tenderizing your dinner with its perspiration. It's a testament to the symbiotic relationship between horse and rider, and the absolute necessity of making every resource count on the vast, unforgiving steppe. While the primary purpose was long-term preservation, the idea of a sweat-tenderized snack is certainly memorable. The experience of eating Bortz wasn't exactly a gourmet affair. You'd pull out a piece, often tough and unyielding, and begin to chew. Slowly, painstakingly, your jaw working overtime, it would begin to soften, releasing its concentrated flavors of cured meat. It wasn't about pleasure. It was about pure, unadulterated energy. It was a caloric injection, a protein punch, designed to keep your muscles firing and your mind sharp, even when exhaustion threatened to set in. Think of it as the original slow-release fuel. You weren't getting a sugar rush. You were getting a steady, sustained burn that kept you going hour after hour, mile after mile. It was the antithesis of a quick snack. It was a commitment to survival. And this brings us to an open scholarly debate. Historians still debate the exact methods of rehydration and preparation of Bortz on the march, and whether simple chewing was the primary method or if water was always sought out to soften it. While the image of a warrior gnawing on a dry piece of meat is powerful, it's also true that Mongols were adept at making use of any available water, even carrying small amounts in leather pouches. Some scholars argue that Bortz was often shaved into a fine powder and then mixed with hot water to create a kind of nourishing broth or gruel, especially when camp was made. Others suggest that the chewing it dry method was far more common when speed was paramount and water scarce. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, adapting to circumstances. But the image of the warrior breaking off a chunk and simply chewing it is certainly iconic. This continuous, high-octane fueling allowed for what can only be described as relentless military advances. Your army didn't stop for elaborate meals. There were no designated lunch breaks, no mess halls, no leisurely dinners with multiple courses. Your dining room was the saddle, your table your lap, and your meal was a constant, almost unconscious act of replenishment. You ate as you rode, you ate as you rested briefly, you ate to fuel the next burst of speed, the next flanking maneuver, the next siege. This wasn't just about avoiding starvation. It was about maintaining peak physical and mental performance under extreme duress. You weren't just surviving. You were thriving on the move, transforming calories into conquest. The cumulative effect of this diet was profound. It meant that your commanders could plan campaigns with an audacity that would seem suicidal to other generals. They could bypass strongholds, knowing their army wouldn't starve. They could undertake vast encirclements, confident in their ability to outlast and outmaneuver. They could launch surprise attacks from unexpected directions, because their troops carried their own sustenance. It was a strategic calorie plan, perfectly aligned with military dominance. Your very diet became a weapon, a silent, unseen force that enabled the thunderous charge of your cavalry. It was the ultimate expression of self-sufficiency, turning a challenging environment into a military advantage. So, when you think of the Mongol warrior, don't just picture the curved bow or the galloping horse. Picture the small pouch, perhaps inconspicuous, perhaps even a bit dusty, filled with those unassuming pieces of Bortz. That was the silent engine, the portable powerhouse, the secret ingredient in the recipe for one of history's most formidable conquest machines. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't complicated, but it was absolutely, undeniably effective. And as you drift off, perhaps you can almost taste that tough, chewy, life-sustaining essence, a flavor of pure, unadulterated nomadic power. Beyond the undeniable, visceral thrum of meat in your diet, there was another, equally vital flow of sustenance that coursed through your veins and sustained your relentless campaigns. Dairy. A dairy. For you, the Mongol warrior, it wasn't just a food group. It was the very liquid gold of the steppe, a versatile bounty poured forth by your herds, transformed by ingenuity, and essential for every breath you took on those vast, unforgiving plains. You see, while the wild hunt or the carefully managed slaughter provided the bulk of your protein, milk, in its myriad forms, offered something else entirely: a renewable, constantly available, and profoundly adaptable source of energy, hydration, and vital nutrients. Imagine the scene. Dawn breaks, painting the endless sky in hues of soft orange and purple. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant campfires. Your herds, immense and murmuring, stir from their slumber. These aren't just animals you raise for meat. They are your living, breathing larders, your mobile supermarkets. From the sturdy mare, the shaggy yak, the nimble goat, and the patient camel, you draw forth the milky essence of life. Each animal contributes its own unique milk, subtly different in fat content, sweetness, and consistency, and you, with generations of inherited wisdom, understood how to coax the best from each. Milking wasn't a chore. It was a ritual, a deep connection to the very creatures that formed the backbone of your existence. You'd probably even developed a system, a sort of ancient pastoral-era ERP, keeping track of which mare was due for milking and which yak was feeling particularly generous today. It was a painstaking process, often done by hand, sometimes with simple wooden buckets, but always with a profound respect for the source. This fresh milk, warm from the udder, was a delight in itself, especially after a long ride or a night spent under the stars. But its true magic lay not in its immediate consumption, but in its potential for transformation. You understood, instinctively, that this perishable liquid held within it the promise of long-term survival. The steppe environment, with its extreme temperatures and lack of refrigeration, demanded innovation. And so, you became a master of dairy alchemy, turning transient milk into enduring provisions. The primary method of transformation was fermentation. This wasn't some arcane science, but a practical, observable phenomenon. You'd seen how fresh milk, left exposed, would naturally sour. But you learned to guide this process, to encourage the beneficial bacteria, those microscopic, unsung heroes of your diet, to work their wonders. By introducing a starter culture, often just a bit of a previous batch, into fresh milk, you initiated a controlled fermentation. This process not only preserved the milk by increasing its acidity, inhibiting the growth of spoilage organisms, but also broke down lactose, making it easier to digest for many, and created new, complex flavors. It was your natural refrigeration system, a living, breathing way to extend the shelf life of an incredibly valuable resource. You might even chuckle, thinking about how modern refrigerators are just fancy boxes, while your ancestors had living, breathing, self-cooling fermentation vessels. Beyond simple fermentation, you also mastered the art of solidification and drying. Imagine taking fresh milk, separating its components, and then drying the remaining solids under the relentless sun and wind of the steppe. This wasn't merely about preservation, it was about concentration. By removing the water, you condensed the nutritional value into a lightweight, incredibly portable, and highly calorie-dense form. These solid, dried forms of milk were a marvel of nomadic engineering. They were easy to carry, impervious to many of the woes that plagued other foodstuffs, and provided a sustained release of energy. It was like having a high-protein, high-fat energy bar centuries before the concept of an energy bar even existed. You could carry pockets full of these hardened dairy nuggets, gnawing on them as you rode, feeling the slow, steady release of energy permeating your core. The sheer versatility of these transformed dairy products was astonishing. They weren't just food, they were hydration, medicine, and social glue. The fermented liquid forms quenched thirst better than plain water in many instances, their slight acidity invigorating and refreshing. The solid forms, when rehydrated, could form the basis of a meal, or simply be nibbled on like a hearty, nutritious candy. And the churning of milk, separating the fat, yielded another invaluable product, a rich, energy-dense substance that could be consumed directly or used in cooking. Mainstream historical fact time. Historians widely acknowledge that the immense herds of horses, sheep, goats, camels, and yaks were not merely a measure of wealth for the Mongol warrior. They were the very bedrock of daily existence, providing not just meat but an unending flow of milk. This constant, renewable resource allowed for a level of self-sufficiency that was crucial for sustaining vast armies on the move, far from agricultural supply lines. It meant you weren't dependent on growing crops or establishing fixed settlements, freeing you to move with unparalleled speed and tactical flexibility across the steppe. Now for a quirky tidbit. It's said that some Mongol families could distinguish the milk of each mare in their herd by taste alone, a testament to their intimate connection with their animals and their profound understanding of the nuances of their primary food source. Imagine the level of palate sophistication required for that. It's like a wine connoisseur, but for horse milk. Ah yes, this batch is definitely from Old Bess, a bit more earthy, wouldn't you say? You might muse to yourself, swirling a cup of fermented mare's milk. It speaks volumes about how integrated these animals and their products were into your daily life. The logistical genius behind your dairy-centric diet cannot be overstated. You didn't just milk your animals, you moved with them. Your entire society was built around the rhythm of the herds. You understood their grazing patterns, their seasonal movements, and how to maximize their output. Your camps were temporary, designed for quick dismantling and reassembly, always following the best pastures. This meant that your food source was always with you, constantly replenishing itself. There was no need for elaborate supply chains stretching back to distant farms. Your supply chain was alive, walking beside you. It was the ultimate farm-to-table experience, except the farm was literally your entire migratory path. And let's not forget the health implications. While modern diets might balk at the fat content, for you, a warrior constantly expending enormous amounts of energy, this was fuel. The fats from dairy provided sustained energy, crucial for long rides and arduous campaigns. The fermented products, in particular, were likely packed with beneficial bacteria, supporting gut health long before anyone knew what a probiotic was. You were probably enjoying peak digestive efficiency, silently thanking those tiny microbes for keeping your system running smoothly. Perhaps the only downside was the occasional, shall we say, windy side effect of a dairy-heavy diet. But when you're conquering the world, who has time for politeness? There's still a quiet academic hum and open scholarly debate about the exact nutritional impact of consuming such a high proportion of fermented dairy products versus fresh milk, especially concerning long-term gut health and lactose tolerance among the steppe nomads. Did the constant consumption of fermented products, which naturally reduce lactose, contribute to a higher degree of lactose persistence in Mongol populations compared to other groups? Or was it simply a matter of cultural adaptation and necessity? These are the kinds of questions that keep modern historians up at night, pondering your ancient gut flora. Ultimately, your reliance on dairy was a testament to your adaptability and resourcefulness. It was a food source that perfectly complemented your nomadic lifestyle, providing sustenance that was renewable, portable, and remarkably versatile. It allowed you to travel light, move fast, and remain nourished, even in the most challenging environments. It was more than just food. It was a fundamental pillar of your existence, a liquid lifeline that powered your incredible journey across the world. And it was all thanks to the humble, yet utterly indispensable, bounty of milk, transformed by your hands and your ancient wisdom into the very essence of your warrior's diet. Now, as the sun dips low, casting long shadows across the endless steppe, and the air cools, you find yourself ready to unwind, to truly understand the liquid gold of your existence. Kumis. Beyond the hearty meat and the practical dairy, there was a drink, a potent brew, that flowed through the veins of every Mongol warrior, offering refreshment, energy, and a gentle balm to the soul after a day of relentless riding. This wasn't just any drink. This was fermented mare's milk, and it was as vital to your survival and your spirit as the very air you breathed. Imagine, if you will, the gentle thrum of the camp as evening descends. The horses, your loyal companions, are grazing nearby. Among them are specific mares, carefully chosen for their milk, their udders full and ready. Unlike the cows you might find in more settled lands, mare's milk is naturally sweeter, richer in lactose, making it perfectly suited for the unique fermentation process that transforms it into kumis. It's a delicate balance, this milking, often done by the women of the camp with a practiced hand, ensuring the mare remains calm and cooperative. You see, your connection to these animals isn't just about riding them into battle or eating their meat. It's about drawing sustenance from every part of their being, respecting their contribution to your very existence. It's a bit like having a mobile, organic smoothie bar, but instead of kale and protein powder, it's all equine goodness. And no, you won't find this at your local Starbucks, no matter how many exotic milks they offer. Once collected, the fresh mare's milk is poured into a special vessel, traditionally a kukur, a large leather bag made from animal hide, often from a cow or horse stomach. This isn't just any old bag. It's a living, breathing part of the kumis making process. Over time, the inner surface of the kukur becomes seasoned with the beneficial bacteria and yeasts necessary for fermentation, a sort of natural starter culture that improves with every batch. It's a bit like a sourdough starter, but instead of bread, you're making liquid energy. And let me tell you, if you ever tried to explain this to a modern health inspector, they'd probably need a lie down. Now, here's where the real work and the magic begins. The kukur isn't just left to sit. It's constantly agitated. You or a fellow warrior, perhaps someone resting after a long patrol, would take up the asa, a long wooden stick with a special churner at the end, and begin the rhythmic, almost hypnotic process of stirring and beating the milk within the bag. This isn't just for show. This constant churning aerates the milk, distributes the yeasts and bacteria evenly, and prevents the milk fats from separating. It's a continuous motion, sometimes for hours on end, day after day, ensuring the fermentation is perfect. You can hear the soft sloshing and bubbling, a comforting sound that speaks of sustenance being prepared. It's a bit like a medieval washing machine, but instead of clothes, it's churning out pure, wholesome energy. As the days pass, the lactose in the milk slowly converts into lactic acid and a small amount of alcohol. The fresh, sweet mare's milk transforms, becoming slightly sour, tangy, and wonderfully effervescent. When you finally pour yourself a bowl, often a wooden one, warm and smooth from countless uses, you notice its pale, almost milky white appearance, sometimes with a slight froth on top. The aroma is distinct, a mix of yeasty tang, a hint of sourness, and a subtle, almost sweet undertone. It's not thick and creamy like cow's milk. It's lighter, more refreshing, almost like a very thin yogurt drink with a fizz. You lift the bowl to your lips, and the first sip is a revelation. It's cool, invigorating, and immediately quenches the thirst that seems to be a constant companion on the dry, dusty steppe. But kumis was far more than just a refreshing drink. It was a crucial energy source. Think about it. You're constantly on the move, burning vast amounts of calories. While meat provides sustained energy, kumis offers a quicker, more readily available boost. The sugars in the milk, even after partial fermentation, along with the lactic acid and the mild alcohol, all contribute to your caloric intake, giving you the fuel you need to ride for hours, to maintain your endurance, and to push through the fatigue that comes with a nomadic warrior's life. It was like your ancient energy drink, but without the questionable chemicals or the jitters. Just pure, natural horsepower, literally. And then there's the mild intoxicant aspect. This isn't about getting drunk and stumbling around camp. The alcohol content in kumis is typically quite low, often ranging from 0.5% to 2.5%, though it could sometimes reach slightly higher levels depending on the fermentation process and duration. It's enough to induce a gentle, pleasant buzz, a feeling of relaxation after a long, hard day. It takes the edge off, allowing your body and mind to unwind without impairing your ability to function or respond to a sudden threat. It fosters camaraderie around the evening fire, encouraging storytelling and laughter. It's a social lubricant, a way to bond with your fellow warriors, to share a moment of peace and contentment before the next dawn calls you to action. It's the warrior's happy hour, but instead of tiny umbrellas, you get a sense of profound connection to your ancient roots. The widespread importance of kumis in Mongol daily life and its indispensable role in sustaining vast armies was noted by many contemporary chroniclers, including the famed Venetian merchant Marco Polo, who traveled extensively through the Mongol Empire. He observed its ubiquitous presence and its vital contribution to the Mongols' remarkable endurance and mobility. This isn't just some fringe beverage. It's a mainstream historical fact woven into the very fabric of their existence. Now for a quirky tidbit about this potent brew. The kukur itself, that humble leather bag, was often passed down through generations. Each bag developed its own unique microbial ecosystem, contributing to the distinct flavor and potency of the kumis it produced. It was believed that the older the kukur, the better the kumis. Some families even carried specific kukurs for hundreds of miles, treating them with reverence, almost as if they were living entities, essential to their well-being. Imagine having a family heirloom that literally gave you energy and a mild buzz. Forget grandma's antique china. This was the real treasure. However, despite its clear importance, historians still debate the precise role of kumis in the Mongol warriors' combat readiness. Was its primary function truly as a direct energy source, quickly absorbed to fuel immediate physical exertion on the battlefield, or was its main contribution more in terms of hydration, mental fortitude, and social cohesion within the camp? While it undeniably provided calories, some scholars argue that its mild intoxicating effect might have been more about psychological comfort and morale than a direct boost to physical performance during active combat. It's a fascinating question. How much was it about the calories and how much was it about the calm? You come to understand that kumis was not just a drink. It was a symbol of steppe life, a testament to your ingenuity and your profound connection to your horses. It was a source of pride, a traditional offering to guests, and a drink consumed with respect. In a world without cultivated grains or easily accessible fruits, this fermented mare's milk was a complete package, hydrating, nourishing, and gently uplifting. It allowed you to maintain your relentless pace, your formidable endurance, and your unbreakable spirit. It was the taste of the steppe, the taste of survival, and the taste of triumph, all in one subtly effervescent, slightly sour, utterly unique brew. And as you drift off, you can almost taste that tangy, refreshing kumis, feeling its gentle warmth spread through you, preparing you for another day of conquest. And so, as the sun dips lower, painting the steppe in hues of orange and purple, we continue our journey into the fascinating world of the Mongol warrior's larder. You've just drifted off, perhaps dreaming of the tangy kick of kumis, that warrior's potent brew. But hold on, because the liquid gold of the steppe offers so much more than just fermented mare's milk. Oh no, your nomadic diet was a masterclass in dairy diversity, transforming fresh milk into a veritable pantry of portable, powerful provisions. Imagine, if you will, the sheer ingenuity of it all. You're not just drinking milk, you are sculpting it, drying it, fermenting it into forms that defy spoilage and deliver concentrated energy. The first, and perhaps most iconic, of these dairy delights are the dried curds, known to many as aaruul or curd. Picture this: fresh milk is left to sour, or sometimes a bit of old yogurt is added to speed things up, creating a thick, creamy curd. This curd is then separated from the whey, often by gently heating it until the solids clump together, or simply by hanging it in a cloth bag to drain. What's left is pressed, sometimes into blocks, sometimes into fascinating, almost artistic shapes, little discs, squares, or even intricate patterns that might remind you of miniature, edible sculptures. This is where a quirky tidbit comes in. These shapes weren't just for aesthetics. Sometimes, the specific form of the aaruul could indicate the type of milk used: cow, goat, sheep, camel, or even a family's unique drying tradition. It's like a secret language written in dairy. Once shaped, these curds are then laid out to dry, basking in the relentless steppe sun and wind. This isn't a quick process. It takes days, sometimes even weeks, until they become incredibly hard, almost stone-like. When you bite into one, it's not a gentle affair. You're met with a resistance that would challenge even the most determined molars. But oh, the taste. It's intensely sour, tangy, and surprisingly refreshing, with a distinct milky undertone. It's not for everyone, perhaps, especially if you're used to the sugary sweetness of modern snacks. But for you, the Mongol warrior, this aaruul is nothing short of a lifesaver. It's your energy bar, your protein supplement, your vitamin chew, all rolled into one, and it never goes bad. Well, almost never. You could probably chip a tooth on it, but hey, dental work wasn't exactly a priority on the steppe, was it? The mainstream historical fact here is the sheer ubiquity and importance of aaruul as a staple food for nomadic peoples, particularly the Mongols. Its lightweight, non-perishable nature made it ideal for long journeys and military campaigns. A handful of aaruul in your saddlebag could sustain you for days when fresh provisions were scarce. You could eat it dry, gnawing on it like a hard candy, or you could rehydrate it in water or broth, turning it back into a softer, more palatable form, sometimes even dissolving it into a thin, sour drink. It was the ultimate fast food of the 13th century, minus the drive-through and questionable hygiene. Beyond the rock-hard marvel of aaruul, your dairy repertoire included various forms of yogurt, or tterig. While kumis was the fermented mare's milk, tterig generally referred to a thicker, spoonable yogurt made from cow, goat, or sheep milk. This was the fresh stuff often consumed daily. Imagine the smooth, cooling sensation of a bowl of tterig after a long day under the scorching sun or a brisk morning ride. It's tangy, of course, but often milder than the dried curds, offering a different kind of refreshment and a good source of probiotics, even if you didn't know what probiotics were. Forget your fancy Greek yogurt with the fruit on the bottom. This was the original power breakfast, packed with live cultures that kept your gut happy and your immune system humming. It was also a base for other products, sometimes churned to make butter or further processed into curds. Then there were the cheeses, or biaslag. While not as varied or complex as the aged cheeses of Europe, Mongol cheeses were typically fresh, soft, white cheeses. These were made by adding rennet, often from the stomach of a young animal, to milk, causing it to coagulate. The resulting curds would be pressed, sometimes lightly salted, and then consumed relatively quickly. They weren't designed for long-term aging like a Gouda or a cheddar. Rather, they were a way to preserve milk for a few days or weeks, offering a different texture and flavor profile than the dried curds or yogurts. You might find them smoked over the fire for added flavor and a slightly longer shelf life, or simply enjoyed fresh and creamy. They were a delightful contrast to the intense sourness of aaruul, providing a milder, richer dairy experience. And let's not forget the luxurious aaruul, or clotted cream. This was made by gently simmering fresh milk for hours, allowing a rich, thick layer of cream to rise to the surface. Once cooled, this layer would be carefully skimmed off, yielding a dense, fatty, incredibly rich cream that was pure energy. It was often eaten plain, perhaps spread on a piece of dried bread if you were lucky enough to acquire some, or simply enjoyed by the spoonful. It was a caloric powerhouse, providing the fat necessary for sustained energy in a demanding nomadic life. Think of it as the ultimate energy boost, far superior to any sugar-laden energy drink you'd find today. This was the real deal, pure, unadulterated fat and protein, designed to keep you going. Even the way the liquid left over from making curds and cheeses wasn't wasted. While often fed to animals, it could also be consumed by humans for its hydrating properties and residual nutrients. Nothing was truly discarded when survival depended on maximizing every resource. This meticulous approach to food processing meant that every drop of milk, from every animal, was transformed into a usable, valuable commodity. It was a zero-waste, hyper-efficient system born of necessity and perfected over generations. The cumulative effect of these diverse dairy products on your daily nutrition was immense. They provided not just calories but essential proteins, fats, calcium for strong bones, and a host of vitamins. When combined with the high-protein meat diet, this dairy bounty ensured you were receiving a remarkably balanced, energy-dense intake perfectly suited for a life of constant movement and physical exertion. You were, quite literally, fueled by the steppe. This high-protein, high-fat diet contributed significantly to your formidable physical endurance and resilience as a warrior. It was a diet designed for strength, stamina, and survival. Historians still argue whether the specific strains of bacteria used in their fermentation processes contributed to unique health benefits that might have given them an edge in endurance, or if it was simply a natural evolution of available microbes. But what's clear is that the constant consumption of fermented dairy likely supported a robust gut microbiome, which, as modern science is now discovering, plays a huge role in overall health, immunity, and even mental well-being. So, perhaps your strong constitution wasn't just about genes and training, but also about the trillions of tiny helpers in your gut, courtesy of your daily dose of fermented delights. The logistical genius of these dairy transformations cannot be overstated. Fresh milk is perishable, heavy, and difficult to transport on campaign. But aaruul, biaslag, and even thick tarig could be packed, carried, and consumed weeks or months later. They were the ultimate non-perishable rations, perfectly aligning with the mobile, self-sufficient nature of the Mongol army. No refrigeration, no complex packaging, just good old Mother Nature, a bit of sun, and centuries of accumulated wisdom. It was food that literally marched with you, ready to provide sustenance whenever and wherever needed. So, as you lay your head down tonight, remember the incredible versatility of milk in the Mongol world. It wasn't just a drink. It was a building block, a source of endless innovation, transformed into a spectrum of products that kept you strong, healthy, and ready for whatever the steppe, or the world, threw your way. From the tooth-challenging aaruul to the creamy, these dairy delights were as fundamental to your survival as your horse and your bow. You've probably settled in by now, feeling that cozy warmth, perhaps imagining yourself on a vast, endless steppe, the wind whispering secrets through the tall grasses. And yes, we've talked a lot about meat, haven't we? Mutton, beef, maybe a little horse if you're feeling adventurous. And then the creamy, tangy dairy, flowing like liquid gold. It's easy to picture the Mongol warrior as this purely carnivorous, milk-guzzling machine, a walking, talking protein bar with a scimitar. But even the most dedicated meat eater, the most ardent dairy enthusiast, needs a little something else. A little roughage, a little splash of color on that otherwise very beige and brown plate. And that, my friend, is where the unsung heroes of the Mongol diet step into the spotlight. The wild edibles. Imagine, if you will, the vastness of the steppe. It's not just grass, It's a tapestry of life, ever-changing with the seasons, and within that tapestry, nestled amongst the familiar, are countless little treasures just waiting to be discovered. So, despite the truly epic quantities of meat you consumed, and the rivers of kumis you probably swam in, you absolutely, positively supplemented your meals with wild plants, roots, and berries. It wasn't just a snack. It was a subtle, yet crucial, nutritional safety net, and sometimes a delightful burst of flavor in an otherwise robust, but perhaps monochromatic, culinary landscape. Think of it like this: you're on a long road trip, right? You've got your favorite beef jerky and your artisanal cheese sticks packed away. But after a few hours, don't you start craving something fresh? A crisp apple? A handful of berries? Your ancient Mongol self felt the same way. While your diet was fundamentally based on the animals you herded, a truly genius strategy for mobility and self-sufficiency, it wasn't a complete nutritional profile on its own. For all the protein and fat, you still needed those elusive vitamins, the fiber that keeps things moving along, and the trace minerals that meat alone might not provide in abundance. This is where the wisdom of generations of nomadic living truly shone through. Your ancestors knew the land like the back of their calloused hands. They knew what was edible, what was medicinal, and what would give you a truly memorable stomach ache. As you migrated across the immense territories, following the seasonal pastures, you weren't just looking for fresh grazing land for your herds. You were also, inadvertently, traversing a vast natural pantry. The women and children, often leading the way or moving alongside the main body of the army and the herds, were the primary foragers. They possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of the local flora. It wasn't just a chore. It was a vital contribution to the family's and the horde's well-being. Imagine a leisurely afternoon, perhaps after setting up camp, where you see small groups fanning out across the landscape, their eyes scanning the ground with an almost preternatural focus. They weren't just picking flowers for a pretty bouquet, though I'm sure some of those ended up in hair or on tents. They were on a mission. One of the most common and welcome finds would have been wild berries. Oh, the berries! Depending on the region and the season, you might stumble upon wild currants, bursting with tartness, or the slightly sweeter notes of wild blueberries. And let's not forget the sea buckthorn. A superfruit before superfruit was even a twinkle in a health guru's eye. These tiny orange powerhouses are packed with vitamin C, a crucial nutrient for preventing scurvy, which, let's be honest, would put a real damper on your warrior spirit. Just imagine the joy of popping a handful of these tangy explosions into your mouth after days of nothing but dried meat. It's like finding a secret stash of artisanal gummy bears, only way healthier and less likely to stick to your teeth. The sheer variety of these wild fruits offered not just essential vitamins, but also a much-needed burst of natural sweetness and acidity that cut through the richness of your meat and dairy-heavy diet. They were often eaten fresh, right there on the spot, but could also be dried or mashed and mixed with animal fat for a kind of primitive fruit leather or energy bar. Beyond the berries, the earth itself offered up its hidden treasures, roots and tubers. Picture wild onions and garlic, their pungent aromas a welcome assault on the senses after the more subtle scents of the steppe. These weren't just flavor enhancers. They offered their own array of vitamins and minerals, not to mention natural antimicrobial properties. You'd also find various wild roots, often starchy and sustaining, which could be roasted directly in the coals of a fire or boiled in a communal pot. Think of them as the original root vegetables, minus the fancy farm-to-table branding. They might not have been as exciting as a fresh steak, but they provided valuable carbohydrates and fiber, giving you that steady energy release you needed for a day in the saddle. It's like finding a surprise potato in your backpack when you thought you only had trail mix. A little less glamorous, perhaps, but incredibly satisfying. And then there were the greens, the wild herbs and leafy plants that added bitterness, freshness, and often medicinal properties. Wild leeks, sorrel, even nettles, carefully handled, of course, unless you enjoyed a tingling sensation in your mouth, would have been gathered. These greens provided essential chlorophyll, vitamins, and minerals that were scarce in your primary diet. Some herbs might have been used for flavoring, others for their purported healing abilities. Imagine a simmering stew, predominantly meat, but then infused with the subtle, earthy notes of wild thyme or the sharp tang of sorrel. It elevates the dish from mere sustenance to something more palatable, more comforting. It's the difference between plain pasta and pasta with a fresh pesto. A small addition, a big impact. A mainstream historical fact here is that the knowledge of these wild edibles was often passed down matrilineally, from mother to daughter, over countless generations. The women of the Mongol camps were not just caregivers. They were vital botanists and nutritionists, their expertise crucial to the survival and health of the entire group. This deep understanding of the local environment, including both its edible and its poisonous plants, was a cornerstone of nomadic life, far more nuanced than simply chasing animals across the plains. Now, for a slightly quirky or fringe tidbit. There are accounts, though less common, of certain nomadic groups consuming the inner bark of specific trees during times of extreme scarcity, particularly in the forested regions bordering the steppe. While not a preferred food, this fibrous material, often scraped and boiled, could provide some minimal calories and help stave off starvation. It's definitely not on any modern gourmet menu, but when you're facing down a harsh winter, sometimes you just have to ask, is this technically food? Okay. Good enough. And this brings us to an open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the consumption of wild plants was a consistent, significant part of the daily diet for all Mongol warriors, or if it was primarily a supplemental activity, more crucial during lean times or in specific regions. Was it a constant, conscious effort to balance their diet, or more of an opportunistic addition when resources allowed? The answer likely lies somewhere in the middle, varying greatly by season, location, and the immediate needs of the horde. But what is undeniable is that the knowledge and practice of foraging were always present, a vital skill in their survival toolkit. So, while your reputation as a warrior was built on your prowess with a bow and your mastery of the horse, a quieter, equally important skill was always at play: the ability to read the land, to understand its hidden bounty, and to harness its natural gifts. This foraging wasn't just about filling a hungry belly. It was about rounding out the nutritional profile, adding variety, and quite possibly preventing illnesses that could cripple an army. It's a testament to the comprehensive, pragmatic approach the Mongols took to survival. Every resource was considered, every opportunity seized. And as you drift off, perhaps you can almost taste the sharp tang of wild berries or the earthy crunch of a roasted root. a secret weapon in your formidable diet. Alright, settle in, because after all that talk of succulent mutton, rich kumis, and the sheer, unadulterated protein power of borts, you might be wondering, where are the carbs? Where's the bread? The rice? The comforting bowl of oatmeal? Well, my friend, if you were a Mongol warrior, you'd probably be shrugging right about now, perhaps even looking a little confused. Because when it came to your diet, cultivated grains played a role so limited, so almost negligible, it's like finding a vegan at a steakhouse. Nice to see, but definitely not the main event. Imagine your life on the vast, undulating steppes. You are a creature of motion, an embodiment of the wind that whips across the endless grasslands. Your home is where your herds graze, and that changes with the seasons, sometimes even with the week. You are constantly herding, riding, hunting, moving. Now picture a farmer. They are rooted to the earth, literally. They till the soil, they sow seeds, they wait, they harvest. This is a sedentary, patient existence, utterly antithetical to your nomadic spirit. The very essence of your lifestyle, your horse-bound, yurt-dwelling, ever-migrating existence, simply did not lend itself to large-scale agriculture. The steppe itself, while a magnificent pasture for your animals, wasn't exactly prime arable land in many places, and the sheer logistics of trying to cultivate, harvest, and then transport significant quantities of grain while maintaining your mobility was, frankly, a non-starter. It would be like trying to run a marathon while simultaneously knitting a sweater, technically possible, but wildly inefficient and probably not your top priority. So where did grains, if any, fit into this picture? Certainly not from your own fields. Any cultivation you or your immediate family might have engaged in would have been incredibly small-scale, perhaps a tiny patch of hardy millet near a semi-permanent winter encampment, just enough for a very occasional porridge, more of a curiosity than a staple. It was never about feeding an army, let alone an empire, from your own humble patch of dirt. No, for grains you looked outwards. You looked to the settled peoples, to the farmers who clung to their land and their harvests, often with a mixture of disdain and pragmatic interest. Your primary source for grains came through two main channels: trade and, perhaps more famously, conquest. Let's talk about trade first. As the Mongol confederations grew and eventually coalesced into a unified force under Genghis Khan, you found yourselves increasingly interacting with the agricultural societies that bordered the steppe. Think of the Chinese dynasties to your east, the various kingdoms of Central Asia to your west, and even the scattered agricultural communities within the fringes of the steppe itself. These people grew millet, wheat, barley, and sometimes rice. And what did you have in abundance? Horses, hides, wool, and other animal products. It was a classic exchange, your nomadic wealth for their cultivated bounty. This wasn't just a casual swap. It was a fundamental aspect of the broader economic relationship between nomadic pastoralists and settled agriculturalists throughout history. You brought your hardy horses, renowned for their endurance and strength, or perhaps fine furs harvested from the wild, or processed animal products like felt, to the bustling trading posts or border towns. In return, you acquired the grains that your lifestyle precluded you from producing in quantity. Millet, a remarkably resilient grain that thrives even in relatively poor soils and dry conditions, was a common acquisition. It's light, stores well, and can be cooked into a simple, filling gruel. Wheat and barley also found their way into your hands, though perhaps less frequently on the campaign trail due to their greater weight and processing needs. This trade, while perhaps not supplying the bulk of your daily calories, provided a crucial dietary supplement and diversification that you otherwise lacked. It was a sophisticated system, even if it often felt like you were just swapping a sturdy pony for a bag of seeds. But let's be honest, while trade was important, the most significant influx of cultivated grains into the Mongol diet came not from peaceful exchange, but from the thunder of hooves and the clash of swords. As your armies swept across Asia and into Europe, conquering vast empires and kingdoms, you encountered societies whose entire existence was built upon the cultivation of these very grains. The fertile plains of China, the irrigated fields of Persia, the rich farmlands of Central Asia, these were the granaries of the world. And once conquered, their granaries became your granaries. This was less about adopting new culinary practices yourself and more about strategic provisioning. When you besieged a city, you weren't just after gold or slaves. You were after its food stores. The vast stockpiles of rice in Chinese cities, the wheat in Persian towns, the millet and barley in Central Asian oases. These were essential resources for feeding your massive, conquering armies. Tribute, too, often included significant quantities of grain. Instead of relying solely on your own herds, which, while immense, still had limits and required constant movement, you could extract sustenance directly from the conquered populations. This allowed your armies to maintain their momentum, to sustain themselves in foreign lands without having to deplete their own animal capital or wait for their herds to catch up. It was an ingenious, if brutal, logistical solution. You weren't growing it, you were simply acquiring it. Think of it as the ultimate farm-to-table experience, just with a few extra steps involving siege engines and a lot of shouting. When these grains were available, how were they consumed? Often, they were prepared simply. Millet or barley could be boiled into a thick porridge, perhaps flavored with a little dried meat or a dollop of yogurt if available. Wheat might be ground into flour for simple flatbreads, though baking on campaign was rare and time-consuming. More often, grains were likely added to communal stews or soups, stretching the meat and adding a different texture and nutritional profile. They provided carbohydrates, a stark contrast to your usual high-protein, high-fat diet. And while not a primary staple for the warrior on the move, these acquired grains did offer a form of dietary diversification. It was like getting a side of artisanal sourdough when you're used to just more steak. A mainstream historical fact here is that the Mongols, particularly after establishing their vast empire, relied heavily on tribute and trade from agricultural societies for grains like millet, wheat, and barley, especially from China and Central Asia. This wasn't about their farming, but their subjects' farming. This reliance on conquered resources became a cornerstone of provisioning the empire, allowing the nomadic core to maintain its mobility while benefiting from the agricultural wealth of its sedentary subjects. Now for a quirky tidbit. While rare for human consumption as a primary food source on campaign, some historical accounts suggest that millet was occasionally carried by warriors in small pouches, not just for themselves, but also as emergency feed for their horses. If forage was extremely poor in a particularly barren region, a handful of millet could provide a quick energy boost for a flagging warhorse, demonstrating the multi-purpose utility of any resource in a resource-scarce environment. It highlights the pragmatic, no-nonsense approach to survival that defined the Mongol warrior. Every calorie counted, whether for man or beast. And speaking of pragmatism, historians still argue whether the limited reliance on cultivated grains by Mongol warriors was purely an environmental and nomadic adaptation, or if it also served a strategic purpose, preventing dependence on vulnerable, fixed agricultural resources that could be easily destroyed by enemies. Was it simply a consequence of their lifestyle, or a deliberate choice to remain unburdened by the requirements of agriculture, thus maintaining unparalleled mobility and strategic flexibility? It's a fascinating debate. Did necessity breed strategy, or did strategy embrace necessity? Ultimately, your relationship with grains was one of acquisition, not production. You were the ultimate consumer, taking what others grew, whether through trade or by force. This method of obtaining grains perfectly aligned with your nomadic, conquest-driven lifestyle. It meant you didn't have to slow down, didn't have to settle, didn't have to wait for harvests. You simply moved and the food followed, often from the very lands you were claiming. So, while your modern self might be reaching for a croissant, your Mongol warrior self is just shrugging, "More meat, please." Now, let's delve into a part of the Mongol warrior's diet that really highlights the sheer, unyielding pragmatism of your existence on the steppe. We're talking about a survival tactic so stark, so utterly born of desperation, that it paints a vivid picture of the lengths you would go to simply to endure. You see, when the borts were gone, the kumis barrels dry, and the land offered no wild roots to chew, there was still one living, breathing commissary right beneath you, your horse. Imagine this scenario. You've been riding for days, perhaps weeks, deep into enemy territory or across a barren stretch of land where even the most optimistic forager would come up empty-handed. The sun beats down, or the wind whips icy tendrils around your face. Your stomach growls with a hollow ache that has long since passed mere hunger and moved into a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. Your muscles scream for fuel, and your mind, usually sharp as a hawk's eye, feels hazy, dulled by the gnawing emptiness within. This isn't just about feeling peckish. This is about the absolute primal need to survive. In these dire moments, you would turn to the ultimate, grim, yet remarkably effective solution: drawing and consuming animal blood. Specifically, the blood of your own horse. Now, before you picture anything too graphic, understand that this wasn't about slaughtering your loyal steed. Oh no, that would be counterproductive, wouldn't it? Losing your transportation, your mobile larder, and your companion in one fell swoop? That's like throwing out your entire emergency kit because you need a single bandage. Instead, this was a carefully managed temporary measure, a testament to the symbiotic relationship between warrior and horse. You would dismount, perhaps with a sigh that feels too heavy for your starving lungs, and approach your horse. Your hand, calloused from reins and sword, would gently stroke its neck, a silent plea for cooperation. You'd know exactly where to find the jugular vein, a prominent vessel just beneath the skin. With a small, sharp knife or even a specially fashioned tool, you would make a tiny incision, shallow and precise, just enough to allow the blood to flow. Think of it like a very, very specific kind of blood donation, except you're the recipient, and there's no fancy hospital bed involved. As the dark, rich liquid began to well up, you would cup your hands, or perhaps use a small wooden bowl or even a leather pouch, collecting the warm, vital fluid. It would be thick, almost syrupy, with a distinct metallic aroma that, in your state of extreme hunger, might actually smell appealing. Yes, your brain, desperate for calories, would likely override any natural aversion. You would drink it immediately, while it was still warm from the animal's body. The taste, you might find, is intensely mineral, salty, and surprisingly filling. It's not quite a refreshing glass of water, nor is it a comforting bowl of mutton stew, but it delivers an instant, potent jolt of iron and protein straight into your system. It's the original energy drink, minus the neon colors and questionable ingredients. No Red Bull, just red. This practice, while certainly grim to our modern sensibilities, was a recognized and accepted survival technique among the Mongols. It wasn't a daily meal, mind you. It was the ultimate emergency ration, reserved for those times when starvation loomed like a hungry wolf at your heels. A mainstream historical fact is that Mongol warriors were indeed known to sustain themselves on horse blood during long, arduous campaigns when other food sources were utterly exhausted. It was a strategy born of necessity, allowing a vast army to traverse immense, desolate distances without the cumbersome logistics of a traditional supply train. Imagine trying to haul enough food for hundreds of thousands of men and horses across the Gobi Desert. It would be like trying to pack for a 5-year trip in a single carry-on. The amount of blood drawn would be carefully controlled, just enough to provide a vital boost without weakening the horse excessively. Your horse was your lifeblood in more ways than one, and you wouldn't jeopardize its health unless absolutely necessary. After drawing what was needed, the incision would be carefully sealed, perhaps with a smear of clay or a quick cauterization if a fire was available. The horse would then be rested, watered, and allowed to recover. It's a remarkable testament to the resilience of both warrior and steed, a kind of extreme shared sacrifice. There's a quirky tidbit here. Some accounts suggest that the Mongols even had specific, almost ritualistic ways of doing this, ensuring the horse remained calm and that the process was as quick and painless as possible. It wasn't a barbaric act of cruelty, but a precise, practiced procedure performed out of dire need. Think of it as a very intense, high-stakes phlebotomy session, only instead of a lab tech, it's a warrior, and instead of a test tube, it's, well, your mouth. The immediate effect of this blood meal would be profound. You'd feel a rush of warmth, a surge of energy that pushed back against the encroaching weakness. The iron would fight off the dizziness, the proteins would begin to repair and sustain your muscles. It was enough to keep you going, to keep you riding, to keep you fighting, until you could reach a place where more conventional sustenance could be found. It wasn't a gourmet meal by any stretch of the imagination. You wouldn't be writing a Yelp review about it, but it was life itself. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread among all Mongol warriors or if it was predominantly confined to the elite units or those facing the most extreme conditions. Some sources suggest it was a last resort, while others imply it was a more commonly accepted emergency provision, a regular part of the warrior's toolkit for survival. Regardless, Its existence speaks volumes about the incredible adaptability and toughness required to thrive in such an unforgiving environment and lead world-conquering armies. It highlights that the Mongol diet, while often robust, always had a contingency plan for the absolute worst-case scenario. It truly puts the survival in survival skills, doesn't it? You wouldn't find this on a modern diet plan, though I suppose it is technically paleo. This isn't just about food. It's about the psychological fortitude it took to overcome the instinctual revulsion. To perform such an act on an animal you depended on so utterly required a mental toughness that few modern people can truly comprehend. It was a stark reminder that in the steppe, life was a constant negotiation with scarcity and hardship, and every calorie counted, no matter its source. It underlines the Mongol warriors' capacity for extreme discipline and their intimate understanding of their animals, viewing them not just as mounts or meat, but as living, breathing reservoirs of life itself. It's the kind of dedication that makes you wonder if they ever had horses that would just sigh dramatically when they saw the warrior approaching with a knife. Like, "Oh, here we go again. Just a little sip, please. I've got a long ride tomorrow. All right, let's settle in and picture something truly mind-boggling. You've got your borts in your saddlebag, your kumis sloshing gently in its pouch, and you're riding with tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands, of your closest warrior friends. And not just you, but everyone's got multiple horses. 4, 5, even more per warrior. Now, imagine trying to get a pizza delivered to that many people in the middle of nowhere, or even just a regular grocery run. It's a logistical nightmare that would make modern supply chain managers weep into their spreadsheets. Yet, the Mongol army, your army, didn't just survive. It thrived, moving faster and striking harder than any army before or since. This wasn't by magic, but by a masterclass in what we can only call mobile self-sufficiency and strategic living off the land. The sheer scale of the challenge is almost impossible to grasp. You're not talking about a few thousand Roman legionaries marching along well-paved roads with supply wagons trailing behind. You're talking about a human and animal tide sweeping across vast, often barren, landscapes, from the freezing steppes of Siberia to the fertile plains of Hungary, from the scorching deserts of Persia to the lush rice paddies of China. Every warrior is a calorie-burning machine, every horse a hay-munching, grass-gobbling beast. And unlike most armies, you don't have a long, vulnerable supply train stretching back to some distant granary. That would slow you down, make you a target, and frankly, it just wasn't how you operated. Your speed was your shield and your sword. So, how did you feed this colossal, fast-moving, multi-legged entity? It began with radical self-sufficiency. Each warrior you included was your own walking, riding, fighting pantry. Remember those borts, the dried meat? You carry enough of that in a small pouch to sustain you for days, even weeks, when necessary. It's the original energy bar, but with way more protein and a lot less questionable ingredients. You also carry dried curds, which can be rehydrated or gnawed on directly, providing vital calcium and protein. And your kumis? Not just for drinking, but a concentrated source of energy that you can carry in a dried, portable form. It's like having your own personal, infinitely refillable protein shake. Your horses, too, are an integral part of this living supply chain. You typically ride multiple horses, rotating them to keep them fresh, but they also serve a grim, yet practical purpose. In dire straits, these magnificent animals become your emergency rations. It's a harsh reality, but an effective one. This concept of the living larder meant that the army, in essence, carried its food with it, not in wagons, but on the hoof, ready to be converted into sustenance when needed. It's the ultimate farm-to-table experience, if the farm is your cavalry and the table is a hasty campsite. This level of self-reliance meant you could detach from traditional supply lines for extended periods, covering vast distances with astonishing speed. This was a mainstream historical fact that utterly baffled your enemies. How could an army of such size appear seemingly out of nowhere, strike, and then vanish or move on, without any visible supply infrastructure? The answer lay in this unique blend of personal provisioning and collective resourcefulness. You weren't waiting for a supply convoy, you were the supply convoy. But even with incredible self-sufficiency, a vast army eventually needs more than just what the warriors carry. That's where strategic foraging comes in, though it often meant something far more organized and brutal than simply picking berries. This wasn't just random scavenging. It was a highly sophisticated, often terrifying method of provisioning. As your army advanced, it didn't march in a single, unwieldy column. Instead, it fanned out into multiple, wide-ranging columns, sometimes stretching for miles, each tasked with sweeping the land for resources. Scouts, the Noyan and their elite riders, would ride far ahead, identifying fertile lands, towns, and villages with potential stores of food and water. This intelligence was crucial. You weren't just stumbling into good foraging grounds. You were planning your route to exploit them. When a region was targeted, the columns would converge, and the process of acquisition would begin. This could involve demanding tribute in foodstuffs from subjugated populations, grain, livestock, anything edible. If tribute wasn't forthcoming, or if the population resisted, the consequences were swift and devastating. The psychological impact of the Mongol reputation for ruthlessness often meant that towns would simply open their gates and offer up their stores, hoping to avoid the alternative. It's like when your neighbor brings over a casserole, but instead of a friendly gesture, it's because you've got a massive, heavily armed barbecue happening in their front yard. Siege warfare, too, was a logistical exercise in food acquisition. When you laid siege to a city, you weren't just trying to break down its walls. You were trying to starve its inhabitants into submission. Once a city fell, its granaries, its herds, its stored provisions, everything became yours. This wasn't just about feeding the army in the moment. It was about resupplying for the next leg of the campaign. Some historians still argue whether the Mongols preferred to completely raze conquered cities or strategically preserve them as future supply hubs and tax bases. The answer likely depended on the level of resistance and the strategic needs of the moment. Beyond the seizure of existing stores, your army also actively engaged in organized hunting and, when possible, even temporary cultivation. While the Mongols were primarily pastoralists, they understood the value of grains. If a region had fields, they might be harvested, sometimes by forced local labor. Wild game, though less reliable for feeding an entire army, was a welcome supplement. Imagine thousands of warriors fanning out, driving game before them in a massive, organized hunt. It's a spectacle of coordinated chaos, turning the landscape itself into a giant larder. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is the concept of the no man's land strategy. When retreating or defending, the Mongols would sometimes deliberately clear a wide swathe of land of all resources, burning fields, driving off livestock, destroying water sources. This created an impassable, foodless buffer zone, effectively denying the pursuing enemy any sustenance and forcing them to retreat or starve. It was an environmental scorched earth policy, turning the very land into a weapon against those who dared to follow. It's like emptying your fridge before guests arrive, not because you're out of food, but because you don't want them to stay for dinner. The strategic calorie plan was always paramount. Every move, every conquest, every decision about where to go next was implicitly linked to the availability of food and water for the army and its horses. Commanders didn't just look at maps for strategic choke points. They looked for fertile valleys, for rivers, for pastures. The success of the Mongol military machine wasn't just about superior tactics or horsemanship. It was fundamentally about logistics, about the ability to feed an unprecedentedly large and fast-moving force in varied and challenging environments. You became a master of turning the land and its inhabitants into your personal mobile buffet. No grub hub for you, my friend. You were the grub hub. This unique system of provisioning allowed for campaigns of astonishing length and depth, striking fear into the hearts of settled civilizations who relied on static supply lines. You were not bound by the limitations of wagons and roads. You were a self-contained, self-sustaining, and terrifyingly efficient force of nature, moving with the speed of a steppe wind, fed by the very lands you conquered. As you drift further into the past, settling deeper into the rhythm of the steppe, you realize that the concept of a leisurely meal, cooked in a stationary kitchen with all the modern conveniences, is simply a faraway dream. For you, the Mongol warrior, every aspect of life is dictated by movement, by efficiency, by the relentless pursuit of conquest or survival. And your cooking methods? They are a masterclass in pragmatic minimalism, honed by centuries of nomadic existence. Imagine trying to set up a gourmet kitchen when your entire home is designed to be packed up in an hour flat. It's less about culinary artistry and more about how do I get calories into my body with the least fuss and the fewest resources? The very first rule of Mongol cooking is this: if it doesn't need to be cooked, it isn't. You already know about borts, that miraculous dried meat that travels in your saddlebag, ready to be chewed or rehydrated with a little water. And the dried curds, the aaruul, are just as convenient, offering a tangy, protein-packed snack without ever touching a flame. This reliance on pre-prepared, shelf-stable provisions is your first line of defense against hunger, a testament to your ancestors' ingenuity. You're basically carrying the world's first MREs, centuries before anyone even dreamed of a plastic pouch. But when fresh meat is available, and it often is, given your mobile larder of sheep, goats, and horses, boiling becomes your go-to method. This isn't just a preference. It's a strategic choice. You see, the cauldron or guzan is perhaps the single most important piece of cooking equipment you possess. This sturdy metal pot, often carried collapsed or strapped to a pack animal, is your kitchen's heart. You set it over a simple fire, filled with water, and into it goes chunks of freshly butchered meat. Mutton is the most common, its rich fat rendering into the broth, creating a nourishing, warming soup. This is a mainstream historical fact. Boiling meat in cauldrons was the predominant cooking method among the Mongols, forming the basis of their daily sustenance and providing both hydration and calories. It's efficient, it's clean, and it makes tough meat tender. Plus, a good hot broth on a chilly steppe evening? Pure comfort, a liquid hug from the inside out. You might toss in some wild onions, garlic, or other roots if you've had the chance to forage them during your travels. A pinch of salt, perhaps some dried herbs if you're feeling fancy, though usually simplicity reigns supreme. The resulting stew is not just food, it's a communal experience. Everyone gathers around the bubbling cauldron, ladling out steaming portions. It's quick to prepare once the fire is going, and it ensures that every bit of the animal is utilized, from the meat to the bones for broth. There's no waste, only sustenance. You might not have a Michelin star, but you certainly have a 5-star rating for efficiency and survival. Beyond the everyday boil, you encounter more specialized, yet equally ingenious cooking techniques. Imagine a feast, perhaps after a successful hunt or a lull in campaigning, where you have a bit more time. This is where korkhog comes into play. It's a bit like a primal pressure cooker or maybe a portable oven, and it's truly fascinating. You start by heating stones. River stones work best, as they tend not to explode when heated in a roaring fire until they are scorching hot. While the stones heat, you butcher your meat, often a whole goat or sheep, cutting it into substantial pieces. Then, here's the clever part. You place the meat and the red-hot stones, alternating layers, into a large metal container, or sometimes even directly into a cleaned animal stomach or a specially prepared skin bag. A little water, some salt, maybe those wild onions, and then you seal it up tightly. The heat from the stones cooks the meat slowly and evenly from the inside out, steaming it in its own juices. The steam builds up, creating a tender, incredibly flavorful result. The smell, when that container is finally opened, is enough to make your stomach rumble even if you just ate. It's a slow cooker method for a warrior on the go, requiring minimal oversight once assembled. A close cousin to korkhog is budog. This method is even more intimate with the animal, if you can believe it. Here, you take a whole goat or marmot, bone it out through a small incision, often the neck, leaving the skin remarkably intact. Then, you stuff the cavity with the meat you just removed, along with those same superheated stones and any seasonings you have. The opening is then sealed, and the entire carcass is roasted over an open flame, often rotated to ensure even cooking. The fat renders, the skin crisps, and the meat inside steams to perfection. It's a spectacle, a testament to your resourcefulness, and a truly unique way to prepare a meal. This use of hot stones, whether inside a container or directly within the animal, is a quirky or fringe tidbit of Mongol cooking that truly highlights their adaptation to the environment and their reliance on readily available materials. It's definitely not something you'd see on a typical cooking show today, unless it was a very specific survivalist one. Now, about fuel. On the vast, treeless steppes, wood is a precious commodity, often scarce. So what do you burn? Aaruul. Yes, you heard that right, dried animal dung. Primarily from horses, sheep, or cattle. These sun-baked patties are collected, dried, and become your primary heat source. It burns hot and relatively clean, with a distinctive, earthy aroma that, surprisingly, isn't unpleasant once you get used to it. It's certainly more eco-friendly than clear-cutting forests, and it's available almost everywhere your herds graze. It's a testament to complete resource utilization. You might even joke that your campfires smell like home, or at least like a very large stable. Beyond boiling and stone cooking, roasting or grilling over an open fire is also an option, particularly for smaller cuts of meat or freshly hunted game. Think of skewers of meat cooked directly over embers, or perhaps larger pieces hung to roast slowly. This method offers a different texture, a smoky flavor, but it requires more constant attention and a steady fuel source, making it less ideal for the rapid, large-scale feeding of an army on the march. It's more of a personal indulgence or a quick cook for a small scouting party. The logistical challenge of feeding a vast, mobile army cannot be overstated. You don't have supply lines stretching back to a central commissary. Instead, you are largely self-sufficient, carrying your food on the hoof or in dried form. This necessitates cooking methods that are not only effective but also incredibly fast and require minimal equipment. Your entire kitchen often consists of that single cauldron, a knife, and perhaps a wooden ladle. There are no elaborate spice racks, no multiple burners, no ovens. Everything is about getting the maximum caloric return for the minimum input of time and effort. You might wonder about cleanliness. Boiling water helps, of course, and the nomadic lifestyle, constantly moving to fresh pastures, naturally reduces the buildup of waste that might plague a sedentary settlement. Historians still argue whether the frequency of raw meat consumption or the lack of stringent hygiene practices contributed to any specific health issues among the Mongol warriors, but what is clear is that their diet and cooking methods were remarkably effective at keeping them fueled and formidable. They were built for endurance, not for delicate digestion. So, when you picture the Mongol warrior pausing on the steppe, don't imagine a complex culinary scene. Imagine the whisper of hot stones against meat, the gentle hiss of a cauldron simmering over a fire of dried dung, the simple act of tearing into a piece of dried meat. It's food as fuel, perfectly designed for a life of relentless movement and conquest. It's a diet engineered for survival, for speed, for the expansion of an empire that stretched further than any before it. Your meals are not just about sustenance. They are a direct reflection of the harsh, beautiful, and demanding world you inhabit. No complicated recipes, no fancy plating, just pure, unadulterated, calorie-dense sufficiency. It's the ultimate fast food for the ultimate mobile army, centuries ahead of its time. You settle down, perhaps on a felt mat within the warm embrace of a yurt, the scent of wood smoke and simmering meat a comforting lullaby in the air. We've talked a lot about what you ate, the sheer pragmatic genius of your diet for survival and conquest. But now, let's peel back another layer, a softer, perhaps more fragrant one, and consider how food was so much more than mere sustenance for you, the Mongol warrior. It was the very warp and weft of your social fabric, the glue that bound your nomadic communities, the language of your hospitality, and the silent strength of your communal bonds. Imagine, if you will, the vast, empty expanse of the steppe stretching out beyond your temporary encampment. Life here is harsh, often lonely, and utterly dependent on the strength of your clan, your obog, your tribe. In such a world, the shared meal isn't just a chance to refuel. It's a ceremony, a declaration of unity, a reaffirmation of who you are and where you belong. When you invite someone into your yurt, a traveler, an envoy, even a stranger, the first thing you offer is food and drink. This isn't just good manners. It's a sacred pact. To offer food is to offer safety, trust, and kinship. To refuse it, well, that's an insult so profound it could spark a blood feud faster than a spilled cup of kumis. And trust me, you don't want to spill the kumis. That stuff is precious. The star of any Mongol gathering, of course, is always meat. You've seen how central it is to your diet, but culturally it's paramount. When a sheep is slaughtered for a feast, and mind you, this is no small affair. It's a whole sheep, often boiled or roasted. The process itself is steeped in tradition. There's a specific way it's butchered, a precise order in which the various cuts are offered. The most honored guests, the elders, the leaders, they receive the choicest parts, perhaps a succulent piece of the fatty tail or a tender portion of the brisket. This isn't just about giving the best to the best. It's a visual, tangible representation of the social hierarchy, a silent acknowledgement of respect and status within the group. You don't just grab a drumstick like it's a casual Tuesday night takeaway. There's a grace, a deference involved. It's a very orderly kind of feasting, considering the potential for a free-for-all when a whole animal is presented. And then there's the communal bowl. Forget your individual plates, your separate servings. Here, everyone gathers around a large platter or pot, reaching in to take their share. This act of sharing from a common source reinforces the idea that you are all in this together. Your survival depends on each other. And this shared meal is a powerful symbol of that interdependence. It's like the ultimate potluck, but instead of everyone bringing a casserole, everyone brings their hunger and their loyalty. You learn to be mindful of others, to take your portion without greed, to ensure there's enough for everyone. Because if there isn't, it's not just one person who goes hungry. It's a failure of the collective. Now, let's talk about the liquid gold of the steppe, kumis. Fermented mare's milk. We've discussed its nutritional value and mild intoxicating effect, but culturally, kumis holds immense significance. It's the drink of welcome, the toast of celebration, the offering of peace. When a guest enters your yurt, you extend a bowl of kumis, often with both hands, a gesture of profound respect. The guest, in turn, accepts it, perhaps taking a small sip before offering it back or passing it on. This ritual exchange of kumis is a fundamental aspect of Mongol hospitality. It's how alliances are forged, how friendships are deepened, how disputes are mediated. You might even say it's the original bro code of the steppe, sealed with a potent, tangy beverage. Historians still argue whether the precise alcohol content of kumis was always consistent or varied wildly based on fermentation time, but its social importance remains undisputed. Feasts or nadams were monumental events, often tied to important gatherings like the kurultai, the great councils where khans were elected and major military campaigns planned. These weren't just political meetings. They were massive, days-long celebrations of Mongol identity and power, fueled by gargantuan quantities of meat and rivers of kumis. Imagine thousands of warriors, their families, their horses, all gathered in one place, sharing food, telling stories, competing in the three manly sports of wrestling, horse racing, and archery. The act of sharing food on such a grand scale cemented the bonds between disparate tribes, reminding everyone that despite their individual loyalties, they were all part of something much larger, the Mongol nation. It was a powerful display of unity, a culinary flexing of imperial muscle. You could almost hear the collective sigh of satisfaction after a particularly good roast. Even outside of grand feasts, the simple act of preparing food was a communal affair, especially for the women. While men hunted and waged war, women managed the herds, milked the animals, and processed the milk into various dairy products, cured the meat, and prepared the meals. This division of labor, while seemingly practical, also fostered a deep sense of shared purpose and responsibility within the family unit and the wider community. The rhythmic churning of milk into butter, the careful slicing of borts, the tending of the fire, these weren't just chores. They were contributions to the collective well-being, performed with a quiet pride. There's a quirky tidbit about Mongol eating customs: the deep respect for bones. After a meal, especially of mutton, the bones were often collected, cleaned, and sometimes even reassembled. This wasn't just for cleanliness. It was believed to honor the animal's spirit and ensure its reincarnation, or at least the continued abundance of the herds. You wouldn't just toss a bone carelessly into the dirt. It had a place, a purpose, even after the meat was gone. It's a rather profound way of showing gratitude, isn't it? Like saying thank you to your dinner with extra steps. Food also played a role in spiritual practices. Offerings of the first milk of the season or choice cuts of meat might be made to the sky god Tingri or to ancestral spirits, seeking blessings for the herds, for successful hunts, for victory in battle. The act of eating itself could be seen as a communion, a way of drawing strength not just from the physical sustenance but from the spiritual essence of the animal. It infused every meal with a deeper meaning, elevating it beyond mere nutrition. So, when you sit down for a meal in your yurt, listen to the crackle of the fire, smell the rich aroma of boiled mutton, feel the warmth of the kumis as it passes from hand to hand. You're not just feeding your body, you're feeding your soul, nourishing your connections, reaffirming your place in the intricate tapestry of Mongol society. Every bite, every sip is a testament to survival, yes, but also to community, to honor, and to the enduring spirit of the steppe. It's a delicious way to build an empire, wouldn't you agree? You've journeyed with us through the core of your Mongol diet, a fascinating tapestry woven from meat and dairy, spiced with the occasional wild find. But here's the thing about living on the vast, untamed steppe. Mother Nature isn't just a gentle provider. She's a demanding, sometimes brutal, mistress. Your diet wasn't a static menu you could pick from every day. Oh no, it was a dynamic, ever-shifting symphony, a direct reflection of the season's relentless march. We're talking about a complete adaptation, a dance with the elements that dictated not just what you ate, but how you prepared it and, crucially, how much you had to squirrel away for the lean times. Picture yourself, a Mongol warrior, waking up on the steppe. The sun might be glinting, but the air tells a story. Is it the crisp, hopeful breeze of spring, or the biting, urgent whisper of an approaching winter? Your very survival, and the survival of your ordu, your nomadic camp, hinged on reading these signs and acting accordingly. This isn't like popping to the supermarket for seasonal produce. This is about life and death, about the very heartbeat of your nomadic existence. Let's ease into the year, shall we? Imagine the long, grueling grip of winter finally loosening its icy fingers. You've just endured months of biting winds, snowdrifts taller than your yurt, and a diet that was, let's be honest, probably a bit monotonous. Then, a subtle shift. The snow begins to melt, sluggishly at first, then with a joyous gurgle as it feeds the parched earth. This, my friend, is spring. It's a season of rebirth, a time of immense relief, but also one of cautious optimism. In spring, your herds, which have also just scraped through the winter, begin to recover. The scrawny, hollow-flanked horses, sheep, goats, and yaks start to find the first tender shoots of grass pushing through the thawing soil. And with this new forage comes the promise of milk. After months of reduced or even entirely absent dairy, the first trickles of fresh milk are like liquid gold. You'd be savoring every drop, transforming it into fresh tarag, yogurt, or aaruul, dried curds, that haven't seen the light of day for what feels like an eternity. It's a time for lighter, fresher foods. The animals are still lean, so large-scale slaughter isn't happening yet unless absolutely necessary. You might consume some of the younger animals born in the early spring, but generally the focus is on rebuilding the herd and their strength. You're also keenly observing the landscape for the first wild edibles. Early greens, wild onions, perhaps some hardy roots that survive the frost. It's a gentle reintroduction to variety, a slow awakening for your palate after the winter's austerity. It's almost like a detox if your detox involved a lot of fermented mare's milk instead of green juice. As the days lengthen and the sun climbs higher, you glide into the abundant embrace of summer. Ah, summer on the steppe. This is the season of plenty, the time when the vast grasslands burst forth with incredible vitality. Your herds are now fat and flourishing, their udders heavy with milk. This is the peak season for dairy production, a veritable Milky Way of delights. You're making kumis by the bucket load, churning out various types of cheese, drying curds until they're hard as pebbles, perfect for gnawing on later, like a warrior's jawbreaker. This is also when meat becomes truly abundant. Animals are at their prime and strategic culling begins. You're not just eating for today, you're eating and preparing for tomorrow and the day after that and the 6 months after that. The sheer scale of food preservation during summer is staggering. This is when the legendary Bort's production goes into overdrive. Imagine huge quantities of meat, sliced thin, hung on lines under the relentless steppe sun and wind. It's a natural, giant dehydrator. This isn't just a little bit of jerky. We're talking about enough dried meat to feed a vast army for months on end. It's a mainstream historical fact that the ability to carry such concentrated, lightweight protein was a cornerstone of Mongol military logistics and their rapid campaigns. Think about it. A small pouch of borts could sustain a warrior for days, far more efficiently than fresh meat. It's like carrying an entire meal in your pocket, without the need for refrigeration or a microwave. No wonder they conquered half the world. They were fueled by super jerky. Beyond meat and dairy, summer also offers the most diverse opportunities for foraging. You'd be gathering wild berries, blueberries, cranberries, sea buckthorn, and various edible plants and roots. These wouldn't form the bulk of your diet, but they provided crucial vitamins and minerals, a welcome burst of freshness. There's a quirky tidbit about this period. Some ancient Mongol texts and oral traditions suggest that certain wild herbs and roots were not just for sustenance but were also believed to imbue warriors with specific qualities, like enhanced courage or stamina, making their collection almost a ritualistic act during the summer months. It's like your personal, natural supplement store, but without the confusing labels. Now, as the vibrant greens of summer begin to fade, replaced by the golden hues of drying grasses, you enter autumn. This is the season of urgent preparation, a race against the impending cold. Your animals are at their absolute fattest, having gorged themselves on the summer's bounty. This is the prime time for large-scale slaughter. The meat, rich with fat, is processed meticulously. Not only is it dried into borts, but significant quantities of fat are rendered and stored. This rendered fat, or almiai, is a vital energy source for the winter, providing concentrated calories in a small volume. It's like their version of energy gels, but a bit more meaty. You'd also be making final batches of dried curds and cheeses, ensuring every last drop of milk is preserved. Any wild grains or roots that could be harvested in larger quantities would be gathered now, too. Historians still debate the precise proportion of wild grains and trade-acquired cereals in the autumn stores of different Mongol tribes, as some had more access to settled agricultural communities than others, making their winter stores vary slightly. It's not just about what you could find, but also what you could negotiate for. And then the inevitable. The winds turn bitter, the sky becomes a bruised purple, and the first flakes of snow begin to fall. You're plunged into winter. This is the ultimate test of your nomadic ingenuity, a time of stark survival. Your diet shifts dramatically from fresh to preserved. You are now almost entirely reliant on the stores painstakingly accumulated over spring, summer, and autumn. Your mainstays are borts, that incredible dried meat, reconstituted with hot water to make a hearty soup or simply gnawed on raw. You're consuming dried curds and cheeses, providing essential protein and fat. Rendered animal fat is a crucial calorie bomb, keeping you warm from the inside out. Fresh meat during winter is a luxury, usually only available through successful hunting, which becomes incredibly difficult in deep snow, or the emergency slaughter of a weakened animal. This is when the grimmer survival tactics, like consuming animal blood to stave off starvation, might become more prevalent, though still a measure of last resort. The cold seeps into your bones, and every calorie counts. You're not just eating to live, you're eating to generate enough internal heat to survive the sub-zero temperatures. It's a brutal, unforgiving season, and the meticulous planning of the warmer months truly pays off now. If you didn't prepare, well, let's just say your bedtime history would have been significantly shorter. You might find yourself dreaming of summer pastures, or perhaps just a really good, hot bowl of bort soup. So, you see, the Mongol warrior's diet was far from static. It was a dynamic, intelligent system, perfectly attuned to the rhythms of the steppe. From the cautious reawakening of spring, through the abundant preservation efforts of summer and autumn, to the stark reliance on stored provisions in winter, every season presented its own challenges and opportunities. This seasonal adaptability, driven by necessity and honed over generations, wasn't just about feeding an individual. It was about fueling a culture, a people, and ultimately an empire. It speaks volumes about your resilience, your resourcefulness, and your deep, intimate connection with the land that sustained you. As your vast cavalry thunders across the known world, you carry with you not just your formidable bows and your indomitable will, but also the very essence of your nomadic diet: dried meat, fermented milk, and the hardy products of your herds. Yet, this relentless expansion, this monumental mingling of cultures, begins to subtly, almost imperceptibly, reshape the very foundation of your plate. Imagine, for a moment, being a creature of habit, raised on the rugged simplicity of the steppe, and then suddenly, every new horizon brings with it a symphony of unfamiliar aromas, textures, and tastes. It's like living your whole life with just a few primary colors, and then one day, someone hands you a full artist's palette, exploding with every shade imaginable. You encounter civilizations whose culinary traditions are ancient, intricate, and utterly alien to your practical, on-the-go cooking. From the sun-drenched orchards of Persia to the bustling markets of Song China, from the spice-laden caravans of Central Asia to the hardy villages of Eastern Europe, each conquered land offers not just tribute in gold and silver, but also a culinary education. At first, it's a matter of necessity. Your massive armies cannot always live solely off the land and their herds, especially when passing through densely populated agricultural regions. So, you demand provisions, and those provisions are, naturally, what the locals eat. Initially, you might eye these new foodstuffs with a warrior's suspicion. What is this fluffy, white grain so different from the hardy millet you occasionally trade for? This, my friend, is rice. In the Fertile Crescent and across East Asia, rice is king. You see it cultivated in vast, emerald paddies, a testament to a settled existence you've largely eschewed. But hunger is a universal language, and soon you're sampling pilafs from Central Asia, fragrant with saffron and studded with nuts and dried fruits. The sheer variety of grains is astounding. Wheat, barley, rye, sorghum. You learn that bread can be more than just a simple, unleavened flatbread. It can be leavened, baked in immense clay ovens, or even steamed into soft, pillowy buns. It's a revelation, a soft counterpoint to the chewiness of bortz. Then there are the spices. Oh, the spices! Having lived on a diet primarily seasoned by salt and perhaps a few wild herbs, your palate is about to embark on an adventure. From India and Persia, you discover black pepper, cumin, coriander, cinnamon, and ginger. These aren't just flavors. They're aromatic explosions that transform even the most familiar meat dish into something entirely new. Imagine a mutton stew, a staple of your diet, suddenly infused with the warmth of ginger and the pungent kick of garlic. It's like upgrading from a basic campfire tune to a full orchestral symphony. You realize that a little pinch of this, a dash of that, can elevate a meal from mere sustenance to an experience. This isn't just about taste. It's about prestige, about the spoils of victory adorning your dinner table. Vegetables and fruits, once mostly foraged from the wild, now appear in an unimaginable abundance. In China, you encounter a dizzying array of leafy greens, gourds, and roots you've never seen before. You learn about stir-frying, a quick and efficient cooking method that preserves the crispness of vegetables, a stark contrast to your long-simmered stews. You taste citrus fruits, sweet dates, succulent pomegranates, and plump grapes. These aren't just treats. They offer vitamins and fiber that your meat and dairy-heavy diet might have lacked. Your warriors, once solely focused on their protein intake, might now find themselves reaching for a handful of sweet, dried apricots. It's a small step, but a significant one, away from pure carnivorous tradition. One of the most mainstream historical facts about the Mongol Empire's expansion is how it facilitated an unprecedented exchange of goods, ideas, and, yes, culinary traditions across Eurasia via the revitalized Silk Roads. While your ancestors might have been content with their hearty fare, you, the conqueror, now sit at the crossroads of the world's most diverse kitchens. This isn't just about eating new things. It's about understanding how others live, how they cultivate, how they transform raw ingredients into complex dishes. You see the elaborate kitchens of conquered palaces, the intricate tools, the specialized chefs, and you bring some of that knowledge back to your own encampments, or rather, your increasingly settled urban centers. Consider the humble noodle. In China, you find noodles made from wheat, rice, and even buckwheat, served in broths, stir-fried, or tossed with sauces. For a people who previously relied on dried meat and dairy for portability, the concept of a quick-cooking, versatile starch like noodles is revolutionary. It's easy to transport in its dried form and quick to prepare, offering a satisfying warmth and bulk that complements your existing meat dishes. Suddenly, your stew isn't just chunks of mutton. It's mutton with thick, chewy noodles, soaking up the savory broth. It's like discovering that your favorite podcast now comes with bonus episodes and a full transcript. More content, more satisfaction. This adaptation wasn't always smooth, of course. Imagine a grizzled Mongol warrior, accustomed to tearing into a piece of boards with his teeth, being presented with a delicate, intricately prepared pastry from Persia. There might have been some initial skepticism, perhaps a few raised eyebrows, and certainly some fumbling with chopsticks if you were in China. Historians still argue whether Mongol elites truly embraced the use of chopsticks, or if they preferred to stick to their more traditional methods of eating with knives and hands, even in lands where chopsticks were ubiquitous. But eventually, curiosity and the sheer deliciousness of some of these new foods won out. A quirky, fringe tidbit you might observe is the adoption of tea. Before your conquests, your primary beverages were water, milk, and kumis. Then, in China, you encounter tea as not just a drink, but a ritual. You learn to brew dried leaves in hot water, sometimes adding milk, sometimes spices. It's initially just a curiosity, perhaps a medicinal tonic, but it rapidly becomes a staple, especially among the more settled elements of your empire. It's warm, it's comforting, and it provides a different kind of energy than kumis. And who knew that something as simple as hot water over dried leaves could be so utterly delightful? It's the original chill pill, if you will, a moment of calm in a world of constant motion. The process of adapting conquered cuisines was incremental, a slow culinary osmosis rather than an overnight transformation. As you establish garrisons, build cities, and govern vast territories, your warriors and their families begin to settle. They intermarry with local populations, and food traditions inevitably blend. Your diet doesn't abandon its nomadic roots. The love for meat and dairy remains strong, a nostalgic link to your heritage, but it expands. You start to see Mongol recipes incorporating rice or noodles, stews thickened with local grains, and meats seasoned with newly acquired spices. Think of it as your original, perfectly functional smartphone, which now has all these amazing new apps that you didn't even know you needed. Even the way you cook begins to change. While mobile cooking methods like boiling and spit roasting remain essential on campaign, in settled areas, you begin to utilize fixed ovens for baking bread and woks for stir-frying. You learn the art of fermentation beyond just milk, observing how other cultures preserve vegetables or make alcoholic beverages from grains or fruits. This isn't just about taste. It's about efficiency, about making the most of the resources available in different environments. This pragmatic adaptation at its finest. The influence isn't just one way, of course. Your love for dairy, particularly kumis, travels with you. In some regions, local populations might adopt elements of your diet, or at least learn to appreciate the strength and simplicity of your traditional fare. But the overwhelming flow of culinary innovation is into your diet. You are the sponge, absorbing the flavors of 1,000 different kitchens. You might even find yourself, after years of conquest, craving a specific type of Persian pastry or a particular Chinese noodle dish. It's a testament to how deeply food intertwines with culture and identity, even for the most formidable of warriors. This dietary evolution has profound implications. A more varied diet, particularly one incorporating more grains, vegetables, and fruits, provides a broader spectrum of nutrients. It might have contributed to better overall health in settled Mongol populations, though the nomadic diet was already remarkably robust for its time. It also signifies a shift, however subtle, from pure nomadism towards a more settled, cosmopolitan lifestyle, especially among the ruling elite. The very act of incorporating new foods means engaging with new agricultural practices, new trade networks, and new ways of living. It's like your personal fitness tracker suddenly suggesting you try yoga instead of just running, a new way to achieve your goals, and perhaps a more balanced approach. Ultimately, your diet becomes a living map of your conquests. Each bite of a new spice, each taste of a foreign grain, tells a story of a distant land, a hard-won victory, and a cultural exchange that shaped not just empires, but the very plates upon which the future would be served. It's a delicious legacy, proving that even the most formidable warriors are, at the end of the day, just hungry humans, open to the delightful surprises the world has to offer. And sometimes those surprises taste really, really good. You feel it, don't you? That hum beneath your skin, that deep, abiding strength that seems to flow from your very bones. This isn't just about filling your belly. It's about engineering a body, a formidable, tireless machine designed for the relentless demands of the steppe and the even more relentless demands of conquest. Your unique, high-protein, high-fat diet isn't merely sustenance. It's a strategic weapon, a biological blueprint for the ultimate warrior. Think about it. Every bite of that sun-dried borts, every gulp of rich kumis, every chunk of hard cheese, is a direct deposit into your personal energy reserves. You're not dealing with the sugar highs and crashes that plague the settled folk who munch on their grains and sweet fruits. No, your energy curve is flatter, longer, more sustained. It's like comparing a sputtering, gas-guzzling cart to a sleek, long-range electric vehicle that just keeps going and going and going. You are, in essence, a human endurance athlete, fueled by the very land you traverse. Your body, stripped of excessive carbohydrates, has become a master at burning fat for fuel, a state that modern nutritionists would call ketosis, but you just call Tuesday. This constant, slow-release energy is what allows you to ride for days with minimal rest, covering distances that would break lesser men and their mounts. You feel the deep burn in your muscles, but it's a controlled burn, not an exhaustion. It's the kind of fuel that lets you leap into a saddle before dawn, ride until dusk, and still have the power to draw your bow with precision or swing your saber with devastating force. Your muscles, constantly nourished by the high-quality protein from mutton and horse meat, are dense, resilient, and quick to recover. You're not carrying excess weight. Every ounce of you is functional, honed by the crucible of your daily life. It's almost unfair, really, how efficiently your body turns a dried piece of meat into pure, unadulterated warrior power. It's like your internal combustion engine runs on pure, concentrated awesome. Beyond sheer stamina, consider the resilience this diet bestows upon you. The high-fat content isn't just for energy. It's crucial for insulation in the biting steppe winds, keeping your core warm when others would shiver into hypothermia. Your skin, thick and weather-beaten, benefits from the essential fatty acids, helping to maintain its integrity against the harsh elements. And those vital organs, tucked away inside you, are cushioned and nourished, allowing them to function optimally even under extreme stress. It's a natural form of biological armor, protecting you from within. You're basically a walking, talking, riding fortress impervious to many of the minor ailments that plague less hardy populations. The constant intake of dairy, particularly kumis, plays a surprisingly sophisticated role in your health. Beyond its caloric and hydrating properties, the fermented nature of kumis introduces beneficial bacteria to your gut. Think of it as an ancient probiotic supplement, keeping your digestive system robust and your immune system primed. When you're constantly on the move, facing new environments and new pathogens, a strong gut is your first line of defense. It helps you process the sometimes questionable water sources you encounter and extract maximum nutrition from every meal. Historians still argue whether the specific gut biome developed by Mongol warriors, thanks to their kumis consumption, played a significant role in their resistance to certain diseases that decimated other armies. It's a fascinating thought, isn't it? Your gut flora might just be as formidable as your cavalry. And let's not forget the sheer density of nutrients packed into your diet. While you might not have had a nutritionist charting your micronutrients, your ancestors intuitively understood the power of nose-to-tail eating. Organ meats, though not always a daily staple, provide a powerhouse of vitamins and minerals. The blood you occasionally consume, grim as it sounds, is a rich source of iron and other vital elements, preventing anemia and maintaining your energy levels even when food is scarce. Your bones, strong and unyielding, are a testament to the calcium from your dairy and the constant physical stress they endure. You're not just strong. You're structurally sound, like a well-built bridge, capable of bearing immense loads and resisting incredible forces. This diet also fosters incredible mental clarity. Without the roller coaster of blood sugar levels that comes from a carbohydrate-heavy diet, your mind remains sharp, focused, and alert. There's no afternoon slump, no fog of post-meal lethargy. You need that clarity for strategic thinking, for split-second decisions in battle, for navigating vast, featureless plains. You're not just physically enduring, you're mentally enduring, capable of sustained concentration, which is just as vital as physical strength when you're leading a charge or planning an ambush. It's like your brain is always running on premium fuel, never knocking, always ready to accelerate. Of course, it wasn't a perfect diet. There might have been times when fresh vegetables were desperately missed, leading to minor deficiencies over very long periods. You probably didn't have the gleaming white teeth of someone who never chewed on tough, dried meat or gritty grains. And let's be honest, your breath after a week of kumis and raw meat probably wasn't winning any awards. But these were minor inconveniences compared to the overwhelming advantages. The trade-off was more than worth it. You were built for purpose, and that purpose was military dominance. This physical robustness directly translated into your legendary ability to campaign year-round, through all weather conditions. While other armies hunkered down for winter, your diet and lifestyle had already forged you into a cold-weather fighting machine. You could endure freezing temperatures, scorching summers, and relentless storms, all while maintaining your fighting edge. This wasn't just about willpower, it was about the physiological adaptations your body had made, supported by the very food you ate. It was a vicious cycle of adaptation and reinforcement. The harsh environment demanded a tough diet, and the tough diet made you even tougher. In the end, your diet wasn't just about survival. It was about thriving in the most challenging environments on Earth and using that thriving as a springboard for conquest. Every calorie, every gram of protein and fat was a building block for your formidable endurance and your unparalleled resilience. You weren't just eating, you were constructing the ultimate warrior. And when you look at the vast sweep of history, at the sheer scale of Mongol conquests, it becomes undeniably clear. Your stomach was as much a part of your war machine as your scimitar. And now, as our journey through the Mongol warrior's larder draws to a close, you finally grasp the sheer, audacious brilliance of it all. This wasn't just a diet. It was a meticulously engineered, calorie-driven blueprint for global domination. You see it now, don't you? This wasn't merely about filling your stomach. It was about fueling an unstoppable war machine, a strategic masterpiece of pragmatic survival, perfectly aligned with military dominance. Imagine, for a moment, the vast, sprawling logistics of any other army of the medieval period. You picture long, winding supply trains, creaking wagons laden with sacks of grain, barrels of salted meat, and all the cumbersome paraphernalia of a traditional campaign. Their progress was dictated by the speed of an ox cart, their reach limited by how far their provisions could stretch before spoiling. They were tied to the land, to fixed points, to the slow, predictable rhythm of agriculture and established trade routes. And then you look at yourself, a Mongol warrior, a blur of motion across the steppe, and you realize you are carrying your entire mobile kitchen on your saddle or perhaps just in your pocket. This wasn't an accident. Every element of your diet, from the humble borts to the potent kumis, was a deliberate choice, a piece of a grand, strategic puzzle. The very fact that you could carry a week's worth of high-energy sustenance in a small leather pouch, or that your cavalry could literally drink their horse's blood in an emergency, meant you operated on an entirely different plane of existence than your enemies. While they were worrying about where their next shipment of flour would arrive, you were already over the next mountain range, appearing as if from thin air, a terrifying apparition to unprepared defenders. It's like trying to win a marathon when your opponent has a personal jetpack and you're still waiting for your Uber to show up. The speed of the Mongol conquests, which saw empires crumble in a matter of years, was directly attributable to this dietary efficiency. Think about the famous Mongol invasion of Europe in the 13th century. They covered hundreds of miles in days, overwhelming kingdoms with a pace that was simply unheard of. Mainstream historical accounts confirm that the sheer rapidity of their advances, often averaging 60 to 70 miles a day for sustained periods, was facilitated by their ability to live off their herds and carry minimal supplies. They didn't need to build elaborate supply depots or wait for provisions to catch up. Their provisions were literally marching alongside them or, indeed, beneath them. This inherent self-sufficiency meant you weren't vulnerable to scorched earth tactics in the same way. If an enemy burned their fields, it might inconvenience you, but it wouldn't starve you. Your animals could graze on whatever remained, and your focus on meat and dairy meant you weren't dependent on seasonal harvests or vulnerable granaries. It gave you an almost terrifying autonomy. You were a self-contained ecosystem of conquest, requiring nothing from the lands you traversed but a little grass and water. It was the ultimate grab-and-go meal plan, except the grab was an entire herd of sheep and the go was to the next unsuspecting kingdom. The high-protein, high-fat nature of your diet also had a profound impact on your physical endurance and resilience. You weren't just fast, you were tough. You could ride for days with minimal rest, endure the brutal extremes of steppe weather, the searing heat of summer, the biting winds and deep snows of winter, and still be ready for battle. This wasn't some fad diet promising quick gains. This was a sustained, high-octane fuel source that built muscle, stored energy, and kept you warm from the inside out. Your body became a lean, efficient machine capable of incredible feats of stamina. It's no wonder you were formidable. You were essentially running on premium fuel while your opponents were sputtering along on whatever was left in the tank. And let's not forget the psychological edge. A well-fed army is a confident army. While your enemies might be suffering from hunger, their morale plummeting with every empty stomach rumble, you were nourished, strong, and ready. This contrast alone could break an opponent's will before a single arrow was loosed. There's a quirky tidbit that suggests Mongol warriors would sometimes share their borts with their horses during particularly lean times, treating their mounts as extensions of themselves, further emphasizing the interconnectedness of their survival strategy. This shared sacrifice, even with their animals, speaks volumes about the pragmatic yet deeply intertwined relationship they had with their food sources. When historians still argue whether the primary factor in Mongol military success was their tactical brilliance or their unparalleled logistical system based on this diet, you now understand that these two elements were inextricably linked. Their tactics, which emphasized speed, encirclement, and overwhelming force, simply wouldn't have been possible without a food system that supported such a dynamic approach. You couldn't outmaneuver an enemy if you had to stop every few hours to forage or wait for a supply wagon. You couldn't launch surprise attacks if your presence was announced by the slow, cumbersome movement of a conventional army. Even the way you cooked reflected this strategic imperative. Simple, quick methods on the move, prioritizing speed and minimal resources. No elaborate banquets, no hours spent preparing gourmet meals. Just efficient, calorie-dense sustenance to keep you going. It was a diet of necessity, yes, but a diet elevated to an art form of military planning. Every piece of dried meat, every sip of fermented milk, was a calculated step towards victory. So, as you reflect on this journey through the Mongol warrior's sustenance, you see it not just as a collection of food items, but as a living, breathing component of their military might. It was the strategic calorie plan, the ultimate expression of pragmatic survival, perfectly aligned with conquest. It wasn't about culinary delight. It was about efficiency, endurance, and the relentless march of an empire. It was, in every sense of the word, a masterpiece. Now, as the echoes of the steppe begin to fade, and the last embers of our historical exploration glow softly, you can let your mind drift. Feel the quiet settle around you, a gentle hush after the grand adventures we've shared. The sounds of hooves on distant plains, and let's not forget the psychological edge. A well-fed army is a confident army. While your enemies might be suffering from hunger, their morale plummeting with every empty stomach rumble, you were nourished, strong, and ready. This contrast alone could break an opponent's will before a single arrow was loosed. There's a quirky tidbit that suggests Mongol warriors would sometimes share their borts with their horses during particularly lean times, treating their mounts as extensions of themselves, further emphasizing the interconnectedness of their survival strategy. This shared sacrifice, even with their animals, speaks volumes about the pragmatic yet deeply intertwined relationship they had with their food sources. When historians still argue whether the primary factor in Mongol military success was their tactical brilliance or their unparalleled logistical system based on this diet, You now understand that these two elements were inextricably linked. Their tactics, which emphasized speed, encirclement, and overwhelming force, simply wouldn't have been possible without a food system that supported such a dynamic approach. You couldn't outmaneuver an enemy if you had to stop every few hours to forage or wait for a supply wagon. You couldn't launch surprise attacks if your presence was announced by the slow, cumbersome movement of a conventional army.